Having heard the testimony and evidence, it appears that there should be a motion to either grant or deny the conditional use approval under section 200-56B6 light industrial park to the applicant. If the motion is to grant the conditional use, then in that event, there should be conditions attached to it. So I guess first, Mr. Chairman, if you call for a motion to either grant or deny the conditional use requested.
Can I have a motion to either grant or deny the conditional use request?
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Now, having heard the testimony and evidence, it appears that. Okay. Now, having heard the testimony and evidence, it appears that the following conditions should be granted or added to the grant of relief. The applicant will regularly check pipes from the tank farm to the main building to confirm that no leaks are in the ground and report that to the township. The applicant will share with the township any state permits which applicant obtains for operation exclusive of proprietary information, as well as any notices of violations of such permits and evidence of compliance remediation following receipt of notices of violation subject to applicable law. The applicant will share with the township and emergency response and an emergency response plan, which the applicant develops regarding the applicant's use of the property, and will also share that emergency response plan with the Avondale Fire Company. Applicant will share with the township fire marshal and the Avondale Fire Company information regarding the nature and volume, sorry, am I going too fast? All right, and volume of materials stored at the tank farm, including information regarding the flammability of such material. The conditional use approval memorialized in this document marked as Exhibit A19 will be terminated and rendered null and void upon the issuance of a use and occupancy permit for the applicant's use of the property as described at the hearing. All exterior construction work will occur only during daylight hours in compliance with applicable township ordinances. This may be redundant, but I'm going to add it anyway. If there is a notice from Department of Environmental Protection, the township will be notified immediately. The applicant will comply with all New Garden Township, county, state, and federal regulations concerning the use. The applicant will comply with all conditions established by the New Garden Township Zoning Hearing Board and the relief granted therein. This grant of conditional use is in reliance on the testimony and exhibits presented by the applicant. And the applicant will comply with all land development requirements contained in the New Garden Township zoning and subdivision ordinances. So if the board is satisfied with those conditions, then we would be looking for a motion to have granted the relief subject to those conditions.
Can I have a motion to grant the relief subject? Can I have a motion to grant the relief subject to those conditions?
I will make a motion to grant the relief for the conditional use at 380 Star Road, subject to the conditions that the solicitor has just read.
A second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion approved. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
You can adjourn the hearing and then.
Adjourn.
Okay, I'm going to adjourn the hearing and then we'll move on to the regular Board of Supervisors business meeting agenda. So we will begin with a formally open it.
Yes, let me just pass these down. This is the outline.
Here you go. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I don't believe, we did not hold an executive session tonight. I don't believe we've held one since our last meeting. Yep.
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to our first item. It is the resolution number 880 in honor.
We're going to do this.
Oh, you want to do the-
instead. That,
Okay.
we're going to move into the hearing for the zoning amendment.
Okay, I thought we were going to do the public comment stuff first.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
There's a resolution through.
Manager of township update, then.
Okay. So township update.
Mhm.
Okay. You want to do that then? Or do you want me to keep?
Oh, keep going.
Resolution 880, a resolution in honor of the retirement of Louis J. Gay, New Garden Township Director of Finance. This resolution is in recognition of Louis J. Gay III for an excellent 17-year career with New Garden Township. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of New Garden Township are extremely grateful for the great service provided to our community by all of our employees. And whereas the Board of Supervisors desires to recognize outstanding performance of our employees as they accomplish important projects and career milestones, innovate solutions, and are recognized by residents and our partners in our community and region for their outstanding work. And whereas Louis J. Gay, also known as Lou, is retiring after 17 years of service with New Garden Township. And whereas Lou started his career with the township on February 23rd, 2006. And whereas Louis served the community as the Director of Finance and Treasurer for the duration of his time with New Garden Township. And whereas Lou, prior to joining New Garden Township in 2006, had previously served 6 additional Pennsylvania local government communities as a financial administrator to include the Borough of Pottstown, Lancaster Parking Authority, the City of Reading, the City of Coatesville, White Marsh Township, and West Goshen Township. And whereas Lou is finalizing a 53-year professional career, 43 of which were in local government service. And whereas Lou has dedicated himself to serving our residents and ensuring the fiscal discipline and financial solvency of the township for the previous 17 years, displaying professionalism, dedication, and loyalty to those he served. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors hereby recognizes the tremendous 17-year career and dedication of Louis J. Gay in serving our township. So thank you for that, Lou. Do you have anything you'd like to say? No pressure, but yeah, just a thumbs up.
Lou, if you want to, you can come up and address the audience in your final hurrah here at the New Garden Township.
Exactly.
The man behind the scenes.
Can you go through the budget again, Lou?
I just like to thank all the Board of Supervisors throughout the years, the managers, all the employees and staff that I've worked with, the various boards, commissions, authorities, and the employees for all of their support and their devotion to this township. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Should we go into public comments or manager?
Whatever you like. Okay.
All right, we'll do public comment. We have one from Ian Mayer at 724 Creek Road in Kennett Square. Mr. Mayor, if you want to, we have a microphone for you.
On behalf of more than 1,000 local pickleball players, I want to thank the board. I want to thank the supervisors for approving the addition of 2 pickleball courts at the old St. Anthony in the Hills facility. There's a lot of people playing. It's the fastest growing sport out right now, and all skill levels and all ages can reach a satisfactory level of play pretty quickly. there's a shortage of local courts, and down at Deacon's Walk where I played yesterday, there were 7 courts set up, 4 people on each court all the time, and people waiting to come and play. I then played at Crossan Park in Landenberg where there were 3 courts. Again, 4 people on every court all the time, and they're very accommodating. Bechtel Park has 8 courts, and Glen Mills has 12 courts. So I made some petitions here, just asking some of the local pickleball players, and very respectfully, we are just petitioning a request to have, for you to consider 6 courts instead of the 2. And I understand there could be some constraints and everything, but I just, on behalf of the people that are playing it, and then if there's another facility where it would be considered as well, that, the more the better.
Great. Thank you.
Love a shirt.
Is that official pickleball uniform? Thank you.
I did dress the way I dressed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, you don't need to do a card. You can just raise your hand. Yeah, that's fine. Don?
For those who don't know me, my name is Don McConaughey. I'm the president of the board of directors for the Somerset Lake Service Corporation, which is the homeowners association for Somerset Lake, which probably most everybody's aware of. Early 1960s, Mr. Benjamin Reynolds was a large landowner in New Garden Township that decided to build a lake on his property. 1965, he received a permit from the state for that purpose. In 1966, Buttonwood Road, which previously ran alongside Broad Run, was moved to its current location. At the time, there was 2 additional pipes that were put under that road because of water flows. One at what's currently a dam, the other one at near Reynolds Road, what's called Reynolds Run. In August 1968, Buttonwood Road was dedicated to New Garden Township by Mr. Reynolds and his wife. Early 1980s, developer purchased a large area around Somerset Lake and included the lake itself with the main dam. 1989, New Garden Township directed the developer to add a second corrugated metal pipe under Buttonwood Road at that stream. It had no name at that point, to handle increased stormwater runoff from the development. So there were now 2 pipes there next to each other, currently where the dam is. Late 1980s, the developer added the standpipes to those stormwater pipes in order to reduce the silt going into the township, into the lake. Early 1990s, DEP required the dam permit since water flow is impeded. Developer became the owner since the blockage was on his property. In 1998, Somerset Lake Service Corporation was formed as the developer, common spaces and clubhouse for that property area. And the particular lots got added to it as they were built. Okay. December 2000, one of the CMPs began to fail on our property. June of 2021, that same pipe began to fail near Buttonwood Road. In July of 2021, we began doing a cost analysis on options to repair the dam since we were responsible for it. August 2021, the township indicated it would not support any repair work for the dam. They did that in writing. November 2021, we began design of a maintenance repair to the dam, which DEP was willing to accept. December 2021, one lane was closed on Buttonwood Road due to the continuing failure of the one pipe. In June of 2022, Buttonwood Road was closed completely because of the increase in failure of that pipe. It was not keeping going to the travel lane. In 1 July, we submitted the letter of authority design packet to DEP in order to get approval so that the change could be made to the dam. In August of 2022, a joint repair effort was done between New Garden Township and the Homeowners Association, and one lane of Buttonwood Road was reopened. And on January 18th of 2023, DEP approved the LOA for the dam repair, which now gives us approval to move forward. During that period, June of 2022, we submitted a letter to New Gordon Township proposing that the township provide cost of materials for under the road and final paving of the road after the dam maintenance work was complete. And SLC, the homeowner association, would fund the remainder of the repair. No formal reply has been received to this request to date. Discussions continued during the summer and fall with Board of Supervisor representatives. We were told that New Garden Township would allocate funds in the 2023 township budget to support the proposal. Our understanding was the funds would be federal funds, not taxpayer dollars. On January 24th, we presented a draft agreement to the Board of Supervisors to solidify and correct whatever we needed to in order to get the work done. Responsibilities of both parties. I want to read. There it is. A sentence from an email that I received from Christopher Himes on February 22nd of this year. The board, and it's in small b, so I'm not sure which board he's referring to. I'm assuming the Board of Supervisors. The board met with the consensus of needing a final cost structure to all elements of the project in order to be able to determine a final agreement that reflected the township's role / commitment in supporting the project. I read this to mean that the township was still working with us in finalizing an agreement. This was on the 22nd of February. On February 23rd, the day afterwards, there was a Zoom meeting held between New Garden Township and the Homeowners Association. Agreement items were reviewed, and New Garden Township asked for estimated costs for the total repair, as well as the sunk cost to date by the Homeowners Association. These were provided on or about March the 8th. A board representative had indicated to me about that same time that the funding was still available and the township was still reviewing the agreement. The next step is we were told that the Board of Supervisors would discuss the agreement during an executive session on March the 20th, which apparently they did. Following day, the manager advised by phone that the township would not be supporting the project. No reason was provided other than the Board of Supervisors decided not to support. Homeowners Association letter of March 28th asked for an explanation that caused this sudden change. And I'm going to read from that letter, on the last paragraph. Find it. I'm sorry, I've got it here next to me. I guess you can't hear me. Apologies. As you are aware, this is from the letter I got from the township dated April 12th. As you are aware, all deliberations and actions by the Board of Supervisors must occur in a publicly advertised meeting. Important point. While 2 members of the board met with members from your organization, there was no other official action by the Board of Supervisors other than noted above. He's deleted some things above, which don't matter to what we're talking about right now. My conveyance to you of individual sentiments of the Board of Supervisors to accept the opinion of the solicitor that New Garden Township has no authority or obligation to assist in the repairs was a courtesy to clarify the situation. There is expressed sentiment to refrain from seeking reimbursement for funds expended, but it is just that and not official action. I wasn't very happy with the way this came out. I don't know who wrote it, but it wasn't very nice. Almost done. All right. So the agreement was a formal request for the township, to the township, for a joint project which would have required public discussion at a regular board meeting before a decision and vote was taken. This never happened. It was done in executive session. Totally wrong. Actions are not supposed to be taken in executive session except for personnel and legal matters. Additionally, SLSC delayed issuing the bid documents pending the final agreement wording since the final form would likely impact the bid package. We have since issued the bid package, because we're going to have to go ahead and do this ourselves. On March the 31st, we have expect to have the bids are due back the 9th of May. We hope to have a contract written by the 1st of June. The goal is to still get the work done this year. Don't know for sure if we're going to make it. Depends on contractor schedules and how long it takes to get some of the materials. The township has agreed to provide the road opening permit at no cost, and will also do the erosion and sediment review at their cost. And one other piece I'm going to bring up is the township was going to replace a concrete corrugated metal pipe under Buttonwood Road near Reynolds Road last year. I'm still wondering if that's still going to happen, or is that going to back down as well? I know the township was busy last year and they may be waiting for something, but I had been told that that would be done. And one final note is there was a House Bill number 499 that was presented to the General Assembly of Pennsylvania on March the 17th, 2023, which would be a change to the municipalities code. And basically, it would allow what we wanted to do to actually happen legally. So my point is, Mr. Chairman, board, I don't think you guys acted in good faith. You didn't allow us to come and make any kind of a presentation. You did this without having public comment or having it done in a public meeting. And I think you didn't do a nice job to us. But we're stuck, so we have what we have.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And
Kenny, can we ask the pipe work that Don was referring to, is that on the schedule for this year?
tentatively it is, yes. We have the pipe on the ground. I am reluctant to do it in case something happens. And then something happens with the issue or with the other double pipe issue. And people are stranded.
Okay.
But
But-
if we can make it work, we'll try to make it work, but I don't want to leave 30, 40 people stranded.
Understood. Is that fair explanation? Thank you. Yes.
Any other public comments? Nope. Okay, we're going to move on to the township manager's presentation or comments. None?
No manager report, but that
manager
part of the thing
report,
will
sorry.
be further on in the agenda for the public agenda.
Okay. So we will go to the, we will briefly pause the Board of Supervisors meeting agenda and move on to the public hearing for the zoning amendment for the composting.
Thank you. This is a hearing which is required by the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code before the board adopts an amendment to the township zoning ordinance. This proposed amendment was advertised in the Daily Local News, and that is Board Exhibit number 1. The New Garden Township Planning Commission reviewed the amendment at their meeting in March. We do not have their minutes, but we understand it was on the agenda and they recommended approval of the amendment. And the Chester County Planning Commission also reviewed the amendment, and they have recommended approval as well. The ordinance amends section 200-120, which are composting standards. And what it does is to change the distance which the ordinance previously provided for certain setbacks and reduce them. And the reason for the change is that there are several Pennsylvania laws, specifically one known as acre, which requires that the township not have setbacks for agricultural uses that are greater than established in regulations established in connection with acre. Our ordinance exceeded that. For townships who exceed setbacks greater than that permitted under acre, the Pennsylvania Attorney General comes calling and charges us with a violation of the ordinance, and we have to then go through a procedure and amend the ordinance anyway. So we're amending it. We have been notified by a particular property owner of their intent to file such a complaint. We're being proactive in doing it ahead of time so that we don't have to deal with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. So the composting standards, none of the narrative part of the ordinance has changed, it's simply the setbacks. Previously, structures and composting facilities had to be set back 100 feet. That has been reduced to 50. The indoor composting facilities previously had to be set back 100 feet from property lines. That's been reduced to 50. Commercial composting outside, which was previously set back 200 feet from a property line, is now set back 50 feet. And outdoor composting facilities, again, have to be set back 50 feet from the property boundary that was formerly 200 feet. And that's essentially the changes. So we've changed setbacks from property lines, and these are all property line setbacks from, in some instances, for outdoor composting, 200 feet, they're now 50. And from indoor composting, which were previously 100 feet, they're now 50. The rest of the ordinance remains the same. So if anyone has any comment about those changes, now is the time. If you just raise your hand and identify yourself so we can get your name, that would be good. Except for the wind, there is no response, I guess then. So then you can adjourn this hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and adjourn the hearing. And we will move back on to the regular agenda for the regular board meeting. So next up, we have the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the March 20th meeting?
I'll make a motion. We adopt the minutes as submitted from 3/20 of 23.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Any comment? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Right, meeting minutes are approved. Next up is the treasurer's report. We have the approval of paid invoices of $90 and unpaid invoices in the amount of $227,217.25 for a total of $227,307.25. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the paid and unpaid invoices in the total amount of $227,307.25.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any comments?
Yeah, there are 2 invoices for RM Crossing, which is my employer, for services rendered to the township. I will recuse from voting on those issues as it be a conflict.
Okay, thank you. All right, so apart from those 2 that Steve noted, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, of approval. Next, we have the Public Works Department report.
Just one thing real quick, our reminder, our spring cleanup is this weekend, or this week, I should say, starting Thursday morning at 7 a.m. And that is pretty much it. Unless you guys have any questions for me, I'll try to keep it short and sweet.
No? Any questions? No? No, thank you, Kenny.
Thank you.
Okay, we have an airport update. Yeah, I think that'd be better. Thank you. Okay, fire company report. Oh, yeah, well, slightly more important. Yeah. Oh, okay. Can you give us the house fire report too, or you just?
It was burning short of a little.
Okay.
That is the report.
The wind's blowing.
There's a
that
house
way
on
now.
fire.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great. Thank you, Ken.
feels like it's been a while since I've been here. So for last month for EMS, we had a total of 146 dispatches. 105 of them were in New Garden. BLS transports was 53. ALS transports was 36. 89 of those were transports, 11 refusals, 14 recalls, 22 no services, and 10 were assist the fire department. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. there was 98 dispatches. 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. there was 48 dispatches. A total of 12 dispatches were missed. 5 of those were transports. All 12 of them were in New Garden Township. EMS from Longwood covered 4 times, transported once. West Grove was 3 times, transported once. Hockessin was 4 times, transported 3 times. And there was a total of 24 second and third calls taken out of those 146. Dispatch to arrival, average time was 7.91 minutes. And dispatch to arrival in quarters was 70.61 minutes, about an hour and 10 minutes from the time they're dispatched to the time they're back in the building, ready to go for the next call. And then for the fire company, there was a total of 50 dispatches. 33 of them were in New Garden. From 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., there was 18 dispatches with 6.5 volunteer firefighters responding, 2 career and 3.5 fire police. 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., 12.3 volunteers, 0.9 career, 5.8 fire police for 12 dispatches. And 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 volunteers, half of a career person, and half of a fire police on 2 dispatches. Let's see. Arrival times, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. was 4.4 minutes. 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. was 4.75 minutes. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. was 6.27 minutes. There was a total of $16.4 million $16.4 million of property protected and a total loss of $131,000 for the month. There was 16 structure fires, 8 EMS assists, 10 vehicle accidents, 3 police assists, 3 dispatch canceled en route, 2 wires, 1 gas leak, 2 odor investigations, 1 CO investigation, 1 aircraft, 1 cover other stations, and 2 service calls. Any questions on that?
Was there ever determination made as to what the cause of the smoke was at the Sunoco alarm?
I believe it was a mulch fire outside that came up in through the siding, but don't quote me 100% on that.
Is that what it was? All right. So yeah, so something for people to watch out for. Now we have had a lot of mulch fires and brush fires and hay fires. So just a reminder to everyone to watch out for those sort of things. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kenny.
Okay, next up, we have the Southern Chester County Regional Police Report.
Good evening, everyone. I will be reporting on some March statistics. In the month of March, there was 255 traffic stops made, 144 citations, 121 of those being in New Garden, 175 written warnings, 143 of those in New Garden. We handled 269 calls for service. Just to highlight some of the higher number of calls for service, we had 83 of those were assist fire and EMS, 22 motor vehicle collisions, 14 suspicious vehicles or persons, 17 alarms, 10 noise disturbances. For the crime report, there were 3 DUI arrests made in New Garden Township, 3 domestic related assault arrests, 1 gun arrest, 1 drug arrest, and 1 theft arrest. For some department updates for our hiring process, the top 4 candidates were revealed. We're looking to hire 3 of those in June and 1 in July. For our promotion process that I reported last month, Greg Blue was named acting sergeant of A platoon as a result of that. For the Kennett Consolidated School District on August 3rd, we're doing a full-scale active threat response exercise. That'll be done at Kennett High School and in coordination with Kennett Square Police Department, Pennsylvania State Police, and Department of Emergency Services. And the last thing I have is we will have our department award ceremony on Thursday, May 18th. It's fitting because that's National Police Week. So I'm hoping to have that here, I believe. Right, Chris? For Thursday, the 18th, is it clear here?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. And that's all I have unless you have any questions.
Any questions? No? Thank you.
You got it.
I don't see it on the agenda, but do you have anything you want to talk about, Mike? Any fun events you'd like to take credit for? Yes, yes, sir. Sir. Okay. Well, I'd like to tell you that I appreciated the event you held at the Township Park for Easter. That was well attended. And I really appreciate you doing that. So you and I know a lot of people, a lot of volunteers put that together. So it was a very successful event. And we hope to see some more coming up in the future. Okay, moving on to business. We did the Purolite conditional use hearing at the start of the meeting. So we're going to move on to the composting setback ordinance. You just need to approve that? Or is there things that you need to?
No, that's a separate procedure. So
Oh, okay. Okay, all right, so we're going to move that along to the zoning hearing board application for 163 Sheehan Road. We have a consideration of a position from the zoning hearing board application for 163 Sheehan Road.
All right, everybody, I shall be brief. I'll start talking while I'm handing these out.
Great, thank you.
Good to see you all this evening, Mr. Sebastian. How are you? Charlie Durbron from Macri Harvey, here on behalf of my client 163 Sheehan KCHG. I have Stephen Gross with me, who's a principal of the applicant. We have filed an application with the zoning hearing board relating to a 9.41 acre parcel on the aptly named 163 Sheehan Road. There's no plan approval being sought as part of this yet. The issue is that my clients are going to be seeking a mixed use development. The minimum under the ordinance is 10 acres. We have 9.41. We believe as a matter of law, it's a de minimis variance being sought. And the reason we're seeking this first is that before my client goes through the cost and the timing of putting together a fully engineered plan before the board, we would like to seek that zoning relief first. I am eternally optimistic about everything, but I'm also not naive, and I realize that it's unlikely that this board, as a policy making legislative body, is going to be favoring relief without seeing any kind of a plan. And I just would ask that you keep in mind that the board will be back. We would be back before the board with any kind of land development plans when that time comes, if the relief is afforded.
I think what I put in front of the board is because it's Mr. Gershon
Sure, Brian.
says they don't have a plan in front of this. They're doing the right thing. They're seeking if they could have a mixed use on less than 10 acres, but there's no plan in front of this. So I developed a form of motion that says if you decide to take no position in front of the zoning hearing board, but if the zoning hearing board were to grant them relief, this variance relief for the de minimis size variance, that grant be conditioned upon them ultimately actually submitting a mixed use development plan. So it's not just a general widespread, yes, you can do anything you want for less than 10 acres. It's limited to that purpose, which I actually discussed with the council. So I don't think that's a surprise.
That's part of me being a realist is I deduced it when your solicitor told me that.
So if it is something the board would like to do, that would be a form of motion that would say yes, or we're not going to take a position, but if you grant it, please place this condition on it. Yes,
I have the recuse, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So note that for the minutes that Mrs. Brodowski would recuse herself because her husband's on the zoning hearing.
And yet I feel I was very close to getting a formal supportive recommendation.
Do you have any idea of what you would, given the size of the property, what you would expect with a mixed-use development? or-
So it would certainly comply, our intention would be to comply completely with the ordinance and have, there would certainly be a strong residential component to it. But as you know, from it hasn't been that long, it wasn't that long ago that the ordinance was revised, and there are specific things that it would have to have. If you're asking, do we know for sure that we have there's no certain convenience store or anything yet that's lined up, nothing in the pipeline like that. It just seemed premature, given that we're under the size to go through that process. The answer would be no for exactly what we're going to do.
I guess my question was, there's like, in our packet, there's a kind of, I guess, initial plan of a
So-
packet of townhomes. I was just wondering.
Yeah, and so there was, prior to the ordinance amendment, there was a plan put together by DL Howe that was just purely for a residential use. That's going to change now. And so I think I just wanted to include that so the board could get a sense of the residential part of it, what it might look like. But I have the density that it might be, but I have a pretty strong feeling that the commercial aspect or non-residential use will be more definitively laid out
Okay.
in another
sure.
land development plan.
Were you expecting more, and again, sorry to belabor the point, but were you expecting a commercial area independent of townhomes, or were you expecting a sort of like townhome above?
It could be
commercial?
either. I
It's just-
think the way the property is laid out right now, I think it is the first possibility would probably be anytime an engineer is involved would be to work with what's already there and try to see where they could carve it out that commercial use. But as you know, the ordinance does require some specific things, like it has to be really a mixed use. They can't have two separate, it is supposed to have those kind of open areas that facilitate it being a mixed use property. So those are the kind of things that will absolutely have to be taken into consideration. I don't think there's, calling it mixed use just because one parcel has two different kind of uses on it is not the way your ordinance is written. So I think there will be some changes to that.
Mhm. For me, just clarify, you're only seeking on the lot size, the relief.
That's it. That's the only reason
So-
I'm here. We're 0.59 acres short.
Correct. And secondly, if you have a mixed use, that would, under the new ordinance, would increase density of the residential component.
Yes, because there are
So I know what
certain
I'm voting.
bonuses that I'd like to call it. If you have a certain amount of open space, you can have increased density, that kind of thing. Yep, absolutely.
Have you asked about that nice empty 1.5 acres that would certainly put you over to the
No,
west?
I don't know if is that across a street or is
It's
it right
this
there?
one right here. Seems to be.
Directly to the east.
Who?
Owned by Hartfeld.
Ah, okay. Can see how that would be a stumbling block. Anyone else have any questions? So I'm amenable to granting relief. Taking no position with the condition that should the zoning hearing board be amenable as well, that condition upon the applicant submitting an application for mixed-use development in accordance with the requirements of the ordinance for said use, and that this grant of variance and relief, that this grant of variance relief does not in any way approve. Wait, no, wait. That doesn't seem clear. That this grant of variance relief does not in any way approve.
Approve a mixed use development is
But it's
just
not-
approving a size. It's just the size.
We're just,
okay,
we're
we're
just
author-
simply
No
granting,
application.
Okay, we're just saying that if he wants to.
Yeah,
Right.
he now
Okay.
can do it with 9.4
but,
acres.
but by way of the request, it's implied to me that that's what they're seeking.
Sure.
Yes.
So,
And if they don't have a variance. I
Right.
guess that's what it is.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure that.
Yeah.
But the only way they're getting the variance is if they do submit. the-
Exactly.
Okay, so the extra knot was throwing me for a loop.
Doesn't
Thank you.
apply to the trash incinerator that we're
Okay,
also
yeah.
considering.
So would anyone like to make that motion or am I allowed to? Can I get a ruling as to, I guess this is more a general question of, as the chair, am I allowed to make motions? I thought that I asked for.
I think
Specific
you are
motions?
allowed to make motions. Ideally, I think you ask for them, but sometimes it's more efficient to just make it and move on. So,
Okay.
yeah, you read it, so you could say that you just proposed that motion.
Okay, we'll just make the motion. Does anyone like to second it?
so you're making the motion to support the application,
No,
Yeah.
it's to be neutral, to take no position,
to take no position.
except if they grant that, then it's just for the size and does not in any way approve a mixed-use development. And to use the variance, they have to actually supply a mixed-use development.
Okay, I will second that motion.
Okay, any
Consensus.
comments? Anyone from the public? Any public comments? Don? Yes. Mhm. Yeah,
This is really just for the size. This isn't, they have to go
Right.
through the development project. They have to go through the process and comply with all the requirements of the ordinance. This is, they have to go through the land development process. And this is simply, the ordinance requires 10 acres to have a mixed-use development. So this is an approval of anything except to allow them to now later submit an application for a mixed-use development on this property. And that's where the traffic study comes in, not now.
Yeah.
This is preliminary.
right. Yeah, so the traffic study will come later. Once they actually submit a plan, would be able to know what the volume is and the number of cars in and out. So. Okay, anyone else? Chris? Wednesday after next. Would you guys be presenting at that meeting or? Or no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I was thinking
May-
planning commission. My apologies.
I'll be happy to, if
Yeah.
you just give me one moment. May 9th?
Yeah.
May 9th. May 9th. 7 o'clock. Probably in the back room.
Yeah, this is a big kids room.
And I believe as part of that, you'll be sending out notices to a number of Hartfeld residents within the,
Yep, 500 feet.
there we go. Great. Okay, so, anyone else, public? Nope. Okay, we have a motion to approve. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, approved.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Now we go back to
Okay.
this.
So my apologies, we're going to circle back to B to take action on the composting setback ordinance. So we're going to take a motion to adopt the composting setback standards that our solicitor earlier in the evening spoke about having to adjust them to satisfy the desires of the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So do I have a motion?
I have questions. Can
Yes,
I?
sir.
Okay, questions are, so we're strictly dealing with setbacks here.
That's
We're
all.
not area in bulk.
Nothing, just
nothing,
setbacks.
Just strictly setbacks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Reduce them all to 50 feet.
And in your opinion, the reason for this change is A, to comply with the state standards of under the acre law,
That's correct. Yes.
which New Garden Township has been challenged on that
Yes.
before.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the composting setback ordinance? Okay, do I have a second? No seconds? Do I have any comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Nope. All right. All in favor, but, done? Yes.
compliance with the regulation, things like within 100 feet of the street. That sort of thing. So our codes officer to ensure that they comply.
Believe that's-
From, I'm sorry, for this ordinance, are you saying, or?
There are a number of
He's asking if it's currently, if we currently enforce it.
setbacks. Has anybody validated setbacks? So we can 300 feet or more.
Do you mean, has anyone gone out and,
There's a very close stream with gigantic tile.
you asking,
Anybody validated the setbacks?
when you say validate, do you mean, does the codes officer go out to existing uses to ensure that there's compliance? Generally, no, zoning officers don't do that. It's for new projects. If you're making a complaint and you believe that somebody's in violation of those setbacks, if you tell the codes officer, he can go inspect. Although we don't have search warrant authority. So, no, we don't have search warrant authority. So if a property owner doesn't let us on, there's limitations to what we can do. But yes,
Interesting.
Mhm.
we don't.
You can, and you can use your GIS as well.
Can we ask a judge for something?
There's a procedure, but it's
Curious if- Not to,
we can get
not to,
administrative
yeah.
search warrants, but they're hard. Yeah, okay.
okay, so do we have a motion to approve?
So we had a motion and we had a second.
Okay,
I
and
think.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes unanimously. All right, so on to the preliminary land development for Rouse Chamberlain Homes.
Good evening, everyone. Allison Zarro on behalf of Rouse Chamberlain Homes. With me this evening are John Penders and Logan Zisk from Rouse Chamberlain, and our civil engineer for the project, Dan Daly from EB Walsh and Associates. If the board remembers, we were here last year about this particular site, which is located at 156 and 162 Bancroft Road in the township. It's approximately 26 acres. It's zoned R2, and we had received conditional use approval for this project, which is 98 townhomes. This site is currently a soil composting area, speaking of the ordinance that you just passed, but that would be eliminated and it would be redeveloped for the townhomes. Since we received conditional use approval from this board, we filed our preliminary land development plan, which has been reviewed by your township consultants and has also been reviewed by your planning commission. Your planning commission made a recommendation of approval on the application at its March 22nd meeting. And so we're before you tonight seeking preliminary land development plan approval for the project. The board may remember, and I would say the key thing that has changed since we were last here is that there was discussion about the access to the site. During conditional use, we were proposing one full access to the site and a second emergency access. That second access has now been converted to a full one-way in access, but it's also been designed to be wide enough so that if emergency vehicles needed to use it to exit or maintenance, et cetera, that can be done. So we're happy to walk through plans, details. Township consultant letters are generally a will comply, and we are requesting 4 waivers. So I'm happy to just pause, answer questions. We do have the plan here, which we can pull up if anybody wants to see it. Happy to proceed as you would like.
Yeah, I'd appreciate seeing it, especially if I think there are some people on Zoom from the area
Yes,
that
probably.
that would want to see it. If you could angle it, I guess you probably have to come a little bit closer. Or no, I guess you're at a pretty good angle.
Well, we have 2 options. We did bring it on paper, but we also have a thumb drive, or do you already, I don't know if you have it electronically, but if not, we do have it on a thumb drive.
Yeah, I did not receive any kind of updated electronic.
Okay.
I have a thumb drive. Would you like to have that?
Yeah, we can.
It's the same submission that was with the
Let me
previous.
see if I can toggle our amazing wide shot camera lens here to the screen. State of the art.
Let me pull this out for the public to see this too, sorry.
And which document is it?
It's the one that says plan. There's a stormwater report. There's one that actually states plan,
The plan submittal?
plan submittal.
Okay.
Wait till comes up on Zoom.
Everybody can see that one.
It's always fun to get these so load. Mhm. There we go. So Dan, I don't know if you want to just give a little bit of an overview of the plan, just or I know it's been a long time since we were here and we have some new faces as well, and then we can walk through details.
Sure. So, hello, I'm Dan Daly, Edward B. Walsh Associates, the civil engineer for the project. What you're looking at here on the plan is our project here. We have access. The plan is similar to the conditional use plan where our main access coming in, northern access, which is towards the top of the sheet, is pretty much identical to what was shown on the conditional use plan. We have we're calling that Road A, that basically enters into the site, two-way access, and then loops around. There's a loop road and there's a main road that leads up to a cul-de-sac. The southern access road is now a one-way roadway. We call that Road C, and that is going to be proposed to be 18-foot wide. And is one way in. The main reason we were having that set up is one way in. There's a curve on Bancroft Road to the south of our project site here that limits the site distance, and we felt it was the most safe to turn around and not have access coming out from that entrance. And based upon the number of units, both our office and your traffic engineer concurred that the layout was safe for people going out of the community. One of the other big items that we made change between a conditional use and this application here is our roads are proposed to be private. We are going to be owned and operated by the HOA. That was based upon some discussions we've had with township staff and the desire for these roads to maintain to not add the burden of taking on these roads by the township, and the applicant has agreed to maintain these roads as private. We have located two off of the cul-de-sac on the far east side of the site. You see a set of lines leading up to Highland Court. Per the conditional use, we are required to provide for future access if and when the township would want to make any kind of connection out to the community. We are not proposing that as part of our project to build any kind of connection into the neighboring property, but we are showing that right of way to be compliant with the conditional use application to provide that future right of way if at some point in the future it was desired. Happy to run through more details here with the project here. I don't know how many more details you want to run through, but those are some of the highlights of changes from the conditional use to the current application.
I have a question, actually. You're not.
Okay.
Do you recall where in the conditional use approval it identified that the roads would be public or private, or was that not provided for?
Yeah.
Sorry. Sure. So there is a condition of approval pertaining to the excess parking on the site. So it wasn't necessarily specifically that it needed to be public or private, but we are proposing perpendicular spaces, and the condition of approval had indicated that if the roads were to be dedicated, that would need to be changed to parallel versus perpendicular, sort of having that, snow plowing maintenance issue. And our preference is to have the perpendicular parking. Therefore, the roads are proposed to be private. I certainly can.
So it's just
Yeah.
sort of an assumption then that they would be public or
Potentially public initially, and then based on the outcome of that particular item, they are permitted. So it's condition 9. It referenced that if the applicant desired to dedicate the roads would have to be widened to permit parallel on-street parking. And so we are leaving the configuration as is, and therefore proposing private roads.
Thank you.
So in terms of any other questions or comments, we do have 2 review letters, one from Pannoni, your civil engineer, dated March 17th, and one from McMahon Associates dated March 20th. Generally speaking, the items in those letters will comply. We certainly are happy to answer any questions about those. And then, as I mentioned, we are requesting 4 waivers, which a couple of which are technical. So I will have Dan run through those if you would like to hear the waiver requests in detail.
Do you guys have any general questions about the changes or the property itself?
No, that's good.
If you want to proceed, thank you.
Just the waivers.
Just the waivers? Okay. Well, I think the first one is really easy, but I'm going to keep you up here because one of them gets a little more technical. The first one relates to what we were just talking about, which is road width. Your ordinance requires a minimum 24-foot wide cartway where no on-street parking is proposed on roads A and B, which is the main circulatory system. We are proposing 22-foot wide roads. And then, as Dan touched on, the one-way road C is proposed to be 18 feet wide. And as we mentioned, they're proposed to be privately owned and they would be maintained by the HOA. This project will have an HOA. The second waiver is a waiver pertaining to widening along Bancroft Road. And Dan, just so I make sure I get the details correct, I'm going to have you run through that one. Absolutely.
So as required by your ordinance, we are required to widen the roadway in front of our property to meet the minimum standards of your roadway width. What we had discussed with the township staff was in lieu of providing that one side of our road widening, that we were going to widen the roadway from the school district widening down along our frontage on both sides of the roadway in order to have a consistent width. We are actually proposing to end up with a 22-foot wide cartway from the school district limits of their work that they did a few years back along our frontage. So it's actually probably a net increase of what we're providing overall with the offsite, but it's different from what your ordinance requires. So we thought it'd be better to have, rather than having a widened area for the school, bottleneck down for a few hundred feet and then widen back out. So we thought this was overall better for the community. So that was waiver number 2. Waiver number 3 is, I got in trouble with the the planning commission, getting too technical with this one. But in short version of this one is you guys have a requirement for road curvatures for your vertical alignments. And we are, the site distance requirements for a sag curve, a curve with a sag in it was a certain distance. We are actually proposing to have that reduced 2 areas, and the 2 areas was Road C on our the entrance road coming in order to maintain our minimum slopes, or try to reduce our maximum slope to 10% coming up the hill. We are having a slightly less than required curve, and we also have another one up at that area where I just referred to is we were trying to align our curve, our low point within the roadway, so we didn't have inlets in front of driveways. So we are having a slightly reduced sag curve requirement, which necessitates a waiver of that requirement. Your traffic engineer was in support of this, of the design considerations. They were very minor adjustments to your minimum requirements. And number 4 was a requirement for relief of the requiring buffering per the ordinance. The existing compost site has a significant amount of evergreen buffering around the perimeter of the tract. And we are looking to utilize the existing buffering. We've done a pretty good job of trying to maintain all of our work within within the center of the tract, minimizing that impacts to the outside buffering. So we are actually looking to retain a significant portion of the existing mature buffering along the north, which is the top of the plan sheet here. The east side, which is the far right side of the plan, and the south side, maintain that. We're supplementary buffering in a couple areas where we're doing some disturbance along the southern property line, based upon the grades and the topography in that area. We do have some disturbance. We are providing the buffering along the south side, additional trees per your ordinance requirements, and then along Bancroft. We are also providing a significant amount of buffering for that area, but it's not meeting the full number of trees requiring, because we're looking to utilize the existing buffering to supplement to meet the minimum ordinance requirements. So it's kind of a shortened version of that. I'm happy to review those landscape plans with you in more detail. The landscape plan. 17.
Do any of the board members have questions about the 4 waivers?
So on the landscaping plan, the limits of disturbance to the existing buffers, you're going to try to minimize the impact of the existing trees that are on buffering Bancroft Woods above.
Correct. So during the northern portion of the site here, we actually have, during the conditional use process, the feedback that we received from I believe both you guys and the planning commission here is we actually moved the cul-de-sac down. We have very little disturbance along that northern cul-de-sac up in the for our plan set here for our design to have very minimal impacts. Actually, I don't think we have any impacts up along, and we're okay. I don't know if you actually can click and just enter the sheet number in the okay, so you're right there, and I click on that and double click it maybe. And I type in 17. See if it does it. Nope, didn't do it. So along Highland Court, we actually we have no disturbance along that area along Highland Court, which is what we discussed about at length during the conditional use process. And so the disturbance that we have is a little bit on the south side of the project limits is based upon the topography and the grades. And in order to try to try to minimize the grading impacts and keeping our slopes right, we had some disturbance on the southern side of the tract.
And then on the cartway width on the interior of the development, that the roads are going to be private. Have you worked with the fire marshal on those road widths and all of that?
We have. We've had a couple discussions and review comments from him. He, based upon my feedback that I received from him, we're okay. He's added some additional hydrants above and beyond the requirements here for the 600-foot radius between or 600-foot distance between that in order to help with that providing fire protection for the community. And he was okay with our cartway widths of how we have this set up. The last discussion that him and I had, which was on Friday of last week, just wanted to confirm he was okay. He had mentioned something about emergency access drive for Road C, which is not an emergency access, it's a permanent access. He was a little unclear what was being proposed on for Road C, but he has basically come back and indicated to me that he's okay with the cartway width configuration as we have it designed.
Yes, please.
I was okay with C, I was going with council required 18. Now I hear you want to go from 24 down, I do have a problem with that.
Yeah.
You can't get apparatus, especially if there's cars parked along the road, which there would be in this development, just like any other development within the township. I can't get apparatus down in these areas, so we got to keep it as wide as possible. If not, I'm going to be taking meters and ladders on the apparatus. We're going to have to destroy the cars.
So we do have no parking signs throughout the community, and obviously that will be an enforcement issue that needs to happen. But we did work with the traffic engineer to place no parking signs along the streets, and it is our intention here to not allow any parking on the streets. It's just going to be the perpendicular parking spaces throughout the community that are going to be designated as areas that you can park in those perpendicular spaces.
So question for Winnie. Who enforces no parking in private communities?
The community.
The community itself.
You contract with the towing company, correct?
So John is here. I know he's got John Penders from Rouse Chamberlain here. I'm sure he's had this issue here in the past. I'm not sure if he'd like to speak about how that's been enforced from a community point of view here with the HOA. Let's put you on the spot. I'm sure you run into this before.
Good evening. That's correct. It's all run through the association and the property manager on that. It's all based on a fine structure. So, I can assure you that there are eyes on the street during that process, and there's photographs taken of vehicles. We've never had, any overnight parking. We've never had any experiences of longstanding vehicles along the route, the cartway itself. As Dan's suggesting, and as we've designed the plan, there is zero parking along the cartway itself. It is only within the driveways and garages, or it's within the dedicated off-street parking that was created for guests and overflow.
I have also been involved in a couple of communities where there is a provision in the vehicle code where the private property owner can invite the police to come on and enforce. There's indemnification is always part of that, but I certainly have done that in a couple of communities where there's been that kind of concern.
Does anyone else have any other questions, comments?
I still think first of all, my own experience, park here, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm park. So why even give them opportunity to jam up? Something's there now, so anyway, something shouldn't hurt that much. 2 extra weeks. We're just out in his house fire just now, now it's not happening. How could be 2 trucks passed on them?
Do you know what the widths are? I know it's an adjoining township, but do you know what the widths are for Penn's Manor? That's usually pretty narrow when I try to get there with all those cars. Yeah.
I know that it can get
Yeah, it's tough enough getting just one car through there, just a normal sized car. Hmm. Does anyone else from the public have comments? No?
Yeah, I mean, the planning commission has been through this.
Mhm.
Except I do have some conditions.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have any.
Yeah.
I think we're done with comments, questions, anything. So, do you have some conditions you'd like to suggest?
Yes. If, in a motion to approve the preliminary plan, subject to compliance with the conditions included in the conditional use decision, and any open items on the consultant's review, except that condition 9 of the conditional use decision is no longer applicable since the applicant intends to have the roads remain private. Condition 9 was there.
Does anyone have any motions to approve waivers? Is that the first thing we should do? See if we approve the
Yes,
waivers?
yes.
Yep. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the waivers or deny them? Anything?
He just read those.
So I guess we can go through and, so the first waiver, would be requiring the minimum of 24 feet where no street parking is allowed. That's the one where Charlie would like us to deny. That's the public safety issue.
I agree with Charlie's assessment personally. I mean, like, just thinking as a home buyer.
Right.
I don't think you're gonna know that this conversation took place, you know?
So would you like to make a motion to deny?
I would make a motion.
Could I just interject?
yeah.
We would still be requesting, even if the board were to deny the waiver on the 22-foot wide roads, we would still request a waiver for the unloaded 18-foot one-way access in. Just to split that up further, not to complicate things,
Sure,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I figure we just go one by one then. If that's all right with you, if that's all right with the solicitor.
I think that's the best way to do it.
So, yeah. So the first one, do we have a motion? Christie has a motion to deny the first waiver. Do we have a second? Second. Troy, okay. Any comment? I think we already discussed it. Comment from the public, I think we've already heard. So all in favor of denying the first waiver? Say aye. Aye. All right, passes unanimously or denied unanimously. Second is the waiver requiring the widening of Bancroft Road along the frontage to 12 feet. And that was the compromise that they said with us where they would be widening from the school district all the way down to their property. So I think
I'll make the motion to approve that waiver. I think it only makes sense so that you don't end up with the hourglass.
yeah.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any comments? Anything from the public? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, so the second one's approved, the waiver. The third is requiring a minimum site distance for minor streets of 200 feet for speed limits of 37 miles per hour on all SAG curves. That's where we're talking about the two site distances not being in compliant with the need to keep the grading at a reasonable level. So anyone want to approve, deny? I don't think you had a problem with that, Charlie, right?
No.
You didn't have a problem with that, Charlie, with the third? Yeah.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
okay, no comments? Nope. Okay, so all in favor, say aye. Aye. Approved unanimously. And then the fourth one is requiring the minimum buffer plantings to be installed. And that's what they were discussing about reusing the
Yeah. I'll make the
already stuff.
motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Okay, any comments? Nope. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Great. All right, so the three of the four waivers have been approved, and then we're going to go on to approve the,
Can I ask for a
Certainly.
point of clarification on the first one?
Mhm.
Would you be able to consider a separate waiver request just for the 18-foot wide road, which is road C, the unloaded road, which is the one-way in? We were
Right.
not proposing
Road,
that
okay.
to be 24 feet wide. So we
Sure.
would still need that waiver for that 18-foot wide
okay,
cartway.
do you have any? You- Okay,
I'll make the motion to approve.
And that specifically would just be for the road C, which was originally the emergency access, but it's currently the one-way in.
Correct.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
any comments? No. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
So 3.5.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we will approve the
Preliminary.
preliminary subdivision and land development plan. I'm sorry?
The plan itself shows the road widths as you have proposed with the waiver.
Mhm.
So the plan as it exists, the waiver has been denied, so the plan as it exists doesn't comply with their approval or the conditions that they've placed on their approval. So what's your proposal for ensuring that the plan is modified when it comes back in for final? Because approval preliminary is kind of rubber stamp. So the piece
Sure.
of paper in front of us is not what this board is approving. So I have a concern about that.
Understood. Would it be possible to condition an approval on amendment of the plans to provide the 24-foot wide cartway width on roads A and B and any resultant, changes to impervious coverage calculation, stormwater management, et cetera?
Does that make sense? to
Yeah.
all of
That
you?
does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I make a motion, I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plan for Roush Chamberlain with one condition, and that would be to amend the current plan, the cartway width on road A and B.
And I have a couple more conditions.
And
And subject to compliance with the conditions included in the conditional use decision and any open items on the consultant's review, except that condition 9 of the conditional use decision is no longer applicable since the applicant intends to have the roads remain private. Make
that's my
sense?
motion.
Okay.
All right, do I have a second to that?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any comments? Any public comments? Nope. Okay, all in favor? What? Yep. Okay, okay. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Goff?
Sure.
Let's see, 26 acre property,
Yes, it's,
98 townhomes are being proposed here,
that's correct.
and the price, it's 1,821 square foot townhomes,
John, is that correct? Okay.
and they're priced in the $400,000 range. And then the project is designated 60% open space.
I think it's 55.
55.
Yeah, it's 55.
55.
Okay, okay. And the original road width is 18 feet. I didn't get that at all.
No, so roads A and B, which are two-way roads, which are the main roads where the townhouses that are actually the roads that have the townhouses proposed on them, are proposed to be 22 feet wide. The board denied that waiver request, so they are required under ordinance to be 24 feet wide. However, road C, which is the extra access not loaded with any townhomes, is proposed to be 18 feet wide, but that is a one-way road.
Okay, thank you very much.
Got it? Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Okay, we're going to move on to rebidding the Bancroft Road Bridge project. So we did not receive a bid, and so we need to try again. So is that Kenny or is that Chris Thing?
Yeah, I was going to have Kenny just provide a quick kind of brief of kind of the confluence of events that led to the no bid, but overall, this is essentially an authorization to rebid the project that we already attempted to from last time. So round two.
Yeah, we had the bid opening Tuesday of last week, not a single contractor put in for it. According to Penn Bid, about 75-ish bidders looked at it. Just nobody put in for it. I made some calls and got a handful of different reasons. So I guess we're going to try it again and see what happens and then go from there. Just trying to stay on the timeline of doing it over the summer while the school is out. We just want to get this out again. And then, like I said, we can reevaluate it hopefully next month and see where we're at. We might have to push it off again until next year or do it during the summer or during the time school is in. We're really not sure yet. We just have to try to weigh our options.
And so what will we try different? What will be different this time?
I'm hoping a little bit more time, and a couple of the bidders I talked to did say if we contacted them, they would at least look at it again.
Okay.
My fear is that means the price is going to go up, but I don't believe we are required to take any of the bids, so we can just table it until a later date, but at least we're moving forward to try to get it done instead of delaying it another year, because then we're potentially going to have storage fees because it's already been sitting for a year, or moving fees and then putting it on one of our properties and then having to pay to move it again. So we're just trying to keep the ball rolling and get a better idea of where we're at.
And some of the complexities with the project is that it's a precast in of itself piece of infrastructure that we're currently hosting in I would consider to be a handshake agreement of storing it on site at basically no cost, with the understanding the project was supposed to be bid out and successfully, implemented this past summer in between school timeframe. Issue being that for the most part, I'd say, which probably the predominant factor was it's a very small project and everybody pretty much built out their schedules a lot earlier. So we got late to the bid process. And so everybody basically already booked all of their business.
Sure.
And so this isn't one that you're going to get national or larger regional scale of interest in. It's very small host of local, regional Pennsylvania construction bidders looking at it. We were just too late, I guess, at this point to get to the bid process. The hope is maybe some people complete scheduled projects sooner than later. This one's kind of teed up to be somewhat of a quick project, considered it's smaller in scope. So the hope is if they can just push it at least a little bit to the left in terms of this tentative schedule date. The primary concern will then be obviously during a school timeframe with school in session, and we would address that. But the biggest risk here is the cost of moving the precast and the risk of it actually being damaged in the movement process. So we want to keep it in place and limit the amount of movements of it as the primary goal of the township. And then we'll address, essentially the cost to store if it goes longer. And obviously the longest one would be rolling it over for another year, but we would earmark a secured bid as soon as possible. But this kind of reattempt is trying to still do it on time here as much as humanly possible.
Okay. And so pardon my ignorance, but so when no one bids on it, are they saying that they will not do it at any price, or do we set a price that we want it to be done at? Or
So I believe that's more of a legal question, and I will attempt to explain it. Might be cheaper for me than her.
well, she's here anyway, so yeah.
if we don't get any bid, since we didn't get any bids the first time, can rebid it or table it if we decide to, but we can rebid it again, which I'm hoping we can do. If we don't get any bids, then I believe within 15 days, we're allowed to go out to contractors and say, give me a price. We can pick the lowest price and then they can do the work for us.
Okay.
Or we can say, oh, we'll just wait until December, January, rebid it again with a more advanced notice for the summer work.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Correct. The goal is to look at what we expected it to be based off of this bid window. Obviously, that didn't happen. This next one, see if there's an actual number. We don't have to accept it. And then third would be essentially taking that and comparing it on kind of that, if nobody bids this next time, and then look at cost to store, cost to move, cost to everything, and then make an ultimately much, I would say, well-informed decision after the fact.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion to rebid the Bancroft Road Bridge project?
I'll make a motion to reauthorize the bid.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
I have a question. We can also, in this motion, can we authorize
Yes.
to do the contract? Because what happens in 15 days is not another township meeting,
No, yes.
depending on the
Yeah,
window.
you can just- And if no bids are received, it's not that you get a bid that you don't like, it has to be no bids received. Then in that event, you can authorize him to begin to negotiate a contract. Now, you'd have to approve that contract at a public meeting.
Correct.
But he could have it ready for your May meeting, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to amend the motion to include the contracting aspect.
I'll second the
You
motion.
Still second.
Mhm.
Okay. Any comments? Anyone from the public? No. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Okay, and then we have the flight school transfer. And so if you want to go ahead and give your kind of whole package of the thing, appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with everybody, especially to discuss my favorite topic, New Garden Airport. I prepared the presentation for this evening to go over several areas to give you some backup information before I get into the formal request for approval from the board. Tonight's presentation, I'm going to cover a brief history on the airport, a former privately owned public use airport to now municipal owned, the current airport mission statement, airport improvement projects, the current airport operations, different events that we've been running throughout the years, aviation education, the flight school history at New Garden, the benefits of an active flight school at an airport, the staff impact, community impact, the costs for transferring a flight school underneath the airport umbrella, the transfer plan, financial transfer plan, liability, and the bid proposal. For those of you that are not aware, New Garden Airport is located on approximately 190 acres in Tough Kenneman on top of the hill, right off the Newark Road. It's actually, I believe, the highest point in the township. The airport, Chris, if you could go ahead and advance, this is not working, the clicker. The airport in 1965 was started by Lex and Ann DuPont. Lex had a passion for aviation and a very understanding wife. They came across 2 parcels of farmland in New Garden Township in Tough Kenneman, where they adjoined the acreage and cleared trees and brought in a bulldozer and started the airport like we know it today. The airport opened the doors on June 9th, 1968. This was the first invitation to their fly-in, where they invited people to fly in for an open house. There were RC model airplanes and antique and classic cars, and we try to continue that tradition every year at our Festival of Flight Air and Car Show. This year, we're not going to be hosting the event, but we will bring it back next year. But we certainly look to keep that tradition alive. Last year, I believe, was the 50th year of the event. Over the years, the farmland was developed in 1972. The primary east-west runway was paved with oil and stone, and 10-unit T-hangar was constructed. This was really the first major development for the airport to attract outside pilots to bring their aircraft, to base their aircraft at New Garden Airport. Over the years, and we'll run through these from 75 to 89, some major improvements were made, some highlighted improvements. The airport was designated as a reliever airport in 1981. We'll talk about what that is in a minute, but that's a major determination on the airport is now able to receive grant funding for the infrastructure improvements and the ongoing upkeep of the airport, which is substantial year after year. In 84, the primary runway was extended 290 feet. 3 T-hangar units were constructed. 6 acres were acquired for obstruction removal. A rotating beacon was installed, so forth and so on. Up into 2007 is when New Garden Township purchased the airport from the DuPont family. The township used a grant to make that transfer happen. It was actually a $2.2 million state grant with a $731,000 local share. You can see these photos up here. The condition of the airport in 2007, there was a lot of upkeep that was needed. Actually, the condition of the runway was in a state where pilots, the comment was that they would not fly to New Garden because the runway was in such a condition that it could, cause damage to their airplane. It was falling apart. A lot of the hangars needed updating, and there were several trailers that needed to be removed. So we certainly had our work cut out for us. But the fortunate thing too, with the purchase of the airport, there were 3 tracts of land. You had the obligated airport, which is the runway, the taxiways, the hangars, everything you think of when you think about airports. The other 2 tracts of land on the northeast side, we have 28 acres of land that is available for sale for long-term land lease to develop into a business park. We've also tossed around ideas of recreational facilities, still open to suggestions and ideas there. But the value of that land to the township is that the revenue that's generated from those 28 acres of through a sale or a land lease will go back to the township. The 14 acres on the southeast side is the same type of property. It's not obligated land, and that was auctioned off and purchased by the Dooley family, which was a neighbor to the airport a few years back, and that money went back to the township. In 2009, we established airport mission statement. This is really to set the course of the airport, and it's to be a visible resource in the local community, providing premier customer service for the general aviation and business communities, focusing on our core values of camaraderie, community and education, and the future of the 21st century aviator. And I just want to point out and highlight the 3 words, camaraderie, community, and education. Those 3 words is really the driving force behind New Garden Airport and what sets us apart from any other airport within the region. We are very fortunate that we have entities at the airport like our current flight school, the EAA Chapter 240, which is a local chapter of a national organization called the Experimental Aircraft Association. Our maintenance facility, the Brandywine Soaring Association, which is a group of about 150 members that fly gliders. You may have seen them up in the sky. And our pilots. They make up the community, the aviation community at New Garden, and really truly is our major asset because we're all working together on a common passion of general aviation. In 2009, the
the current flight school opened its doors. Early 2009, as the DuPonts were segueing out of the aviation business altogether, they ran the flight school. They also ran the maintenance shop, as well as owning the airport. After the transfer happened, they continued to operate the flight school for a period of time until they decided that they no longer were interested in continuing the flight school. This left us in a situation where we had several students learning to fly that had been learning to fly there, spending money and their time and their assets at the airport. But ultimately, they didn't have a place to go because the flight school closed the doors. So what happened, we reached out to other local airports, not to name names, to see if they would be interested in operating and starting a satellite operation of their flight school at New Garden Airport. And that's what happened. One of the local airports came down. We renovated one of the trailers. They brought an aircraft down and some flight instructors and started training the existing students. What quickly happened and what we noticed was that the students were then being told that they should finish their training at another airport, another local airport where the home base was for this flight school. Certainly understand their side of things, but what we were looking for was a flight school for New Garden Airport, for New Garden Township, to promote and grow the airport, not to promote and grow a neighboring airport. So that didn't work best for us. So I reached out to a friend of mine who was actually a grade school teacher of mine, Court Dunn, over at Upland Country Day School. He was also my hockey coach. He had a love of aviation. He was the eternal student. He was a student of flying for about 25 years. The insurance company said, Court, if you don't get your license within the next 2 years, there's obviously something wrong with you. We will probably not want to continue insuring you. So he went out with some motivation from the insurance company and from myself, and he got his private pilot's license. But again, growing up with Court, he's a people person. He's an educator. And I asked him, I said, if you ever continued or if you ever thought about running and owning a flight school? And he said, no, I haven't. But let's talk. So we talked, and it was not that long, maybe a couple of days. He called me back. He said, let's do it. So that weekend, Court and I flew up to Rochester, New York, and brought back a Cessna 172, which was the first aircraft for New Garden Flight Connection. We'll talk a little bit more about the growth of the flight school, and we can't advance the slide anymore on your end. Another 2 slides forward. Next one. Systematic approach to airport development. This slide's important because with the township ownership of the airport, if you look down at the bottom right, this is what's called the ALP, the airport layout plan for the airport. This is a state document. This is what's on file with the Bureau of Aviation. This is what grant funding is really based off of. Any building or anything that we're going for funding has to be located on the ALP. But it didn't necessarily make sense. It wasn't realistic. I mean, there were buildings everywhere. There were hangars, taxiways in areas that you could never really build a hangar or taxiway. So it was more or less overdeveloped. So we wanted to come up with a master plan for the airport that was defined by a systematic approach to development. We didn't necessarily want to build corporate size hangars without having a runway that could handle a corporate aircraft. We didn't want to put in an approach without the ability to sell fuel to the aircraft that would be utilizing the approach. So we came up with a master plan. We're both doing it now. Yeah, my clicker works now. We came up with a master plan internally on the township level that was a hand-in-glove relationship between the non-obligated property that came with the airport's purchase on the northeast side with the business park, and the actual obligated airport with the runway and the taxiways, walking trails through the woods around the business park, a growth of the airport with hangars, a realistic growth of the airport with hangars, and some open space. And I think to this day, we still look to this master plan for guidance on the systematic approach to development. And over the years, and we'll talk about development of what we've gone through, our first major project in 2009, 2010 was the parallel taxiway. This was an interesting project and a very big safety improvement for the airport overall. Up until this point, this parallel taxiway did not exist. Actually, the taxiway stopped at the crossing intersection. The aircraft landing would have to do a 180-degree turn on the runway and back taxi on the runway surface to get cleared at the intersecting taxiway. Obviously, if you had another airplane on short final at that point, there's a situation. Either the aircraft is going around or the guy on the runway is getting off into the grass. So it was a mess. So building a parallel taxiway was a huge safety improvement. We had to bring in enough dirt to fill the level of ground up 50 feet to get the grade to where the FAA would approve the design. But that was a federal state funded $2.9 million of that project and 72,000 of a local share. And when I say local share, what I mean by that is the airport fund. The difference between obligated property and unobligated property is that on the obligated property where the airport sits, the aviation center, the runway, the taxiway, all the revenue that's generated on airport obligated land has to remain at the airport. So we can pay for local shares of grants, operational improvements, and so forth and so on. The next major focus on projects was in 2013, our West Hangar apron, which surrounds the West T hangars. You can see the condition of the asphalt. It was literally falling apart. Some of the chunks were bigger than that Wawa coffee cup next to it. And that is another big safety concern with these aircraft that operate out of the New Garden Airport or general aviation airplanes, prop-driven aircraft. That propeller has the potential to pick up some of those rocks and FOD and creates a hazard. So getting this remedied was certainly something that we needed to do quickly. And we were able to get a state local grant that was $271,000 of a state funded grant. And that was $90,000 local share to get that completed. Ongoing projects operationally we do during the summertime is a lot of hangar painting. These are local projects that we do in-house. Our west access road down to the West Tees, we redid that project. That road was deteriorated to the point where our tenants would get out on the taxiway to drive down to the hangars because it was in such bad condition. We updated our fuel terminal over the years. We have 24/7 fueling capabilities out at the airport, just like Wawa with your car. You can fly your aircraft in, pull up to the pumps, put your credit card in and get fuel. And we maintain the fuel concession at the airport. New hangars were developed. This was 2014. We recognized the need. Hangar rent and fuel sales is the airport's #1 revenue source. There was a current waiting list. There still is a current waiting list at the airport. We have about 30 people on that waiting list. So building new hangars at the airport looked like an easy thing to do, except for how do we pay for it? How do we pay for it internally, operating inside the airport budget? We looked at 3 different options. #1 would be to use a private developer where we would enter into a land lease agreement with the developer. And then they would build these hangars and then sell them to aircraft owners. Second option would be to create a hangar owners group where we would gather a group of individuals that wanted to put in private investment dollars into building hangars at the airport because they have aircraft and they want to house them there. Or ideally would be for the airport to build them and to rent them. That would provide revenue for the airport long term.
And that's really the ideal situation for New Garden. However, it's that whole how do we pay for it issue. So we actually exercised all three of those options. And in 2014, the state came out with a new funding source called the Multimodal Transportation Fund. We submitted an application for this on June 6, 2014, and we were successful. Actually, PennDOT released a press release on October 29th, 2014, that New Garden Flying Field will be receiving funds for the proposed hangar project. We were actually the first airport to be awarded a multimodal transportation fund grant from the state. And we were the first airport to complete a project under the multimodal transportation fund. They have since changed the program. That funding source now goes through and is funneled through the Bureau of Aviation, and it is used internally to disperse through the different airports. So we got in at a right time. Here's a look at the hangar that was completed. We built 7 T hangars and 2 box hangars. It's 1 row hangar. Great improvement for the airport. Really what this did was create hangars at New Garden Airport where we have a full range of facilities now to house your particular aircraft. Everybody's budget for airplanes is different, just like everybody's budget for a car is different. I mean, we have grassroots aviators that are not looking for the best hangar out there. They're just looking for a roof over their aircraft to protect their investment. And we have some business users that have lot nicer airplanes that are looking for a little bit nicer of a facility for their airplane. And we can accommodate each and every one of those aviators at this point at New Garden. The next major project that we should all be aware of is our runway reconstruction project, which happened in 2014. Ironically, up until this point, well, up until about a year or 3 years before this, actually, our runway reconstruction project was never planned, was never even thought of. The Bureau of Aviation said that the DuPonts never really wanted to shut down the runway because that would affect their business, which again, I understand their side, but the runway is the most important asset that any airport has. If you take the runway away, it doesn't matter what the hangars look like. It doesn't matter what kind of fuel you sell. It doesn't matter what kind of approach. You got to have a runway. So we work with the state on getting the runway project listed in our 12-year plan. The way that the funding cycles work is that a project has to be listed in the 12-year plan, which then the Bureau looks at and they approve a 4-year cycle. So if a project's not listed in the 12-year plan, there's no chance that it's going to get funded. But we were able to work with the Bureau and get the runway project slotted in the 4-year plan and get it funded. That was essentially a $6.7 million federally funded project. The state kicked in $372,000 and the airport's local share was $372,000 as well. This was a major undertaking. If you look at the scope of work, there were several trees, 27 acres of trees that had to be removed. The reconstruction of the runway pavement, we had to rip up the entire runway, including the subbase underneath that. We widened the runway. The existing runway at that point was only 50 feet wide, which did not meet state standards. State standards is 60 feet. The runway lighting, which if you can imagine landing at nighttime on final, the runway lights is the runway. I mean, that the lights on the left and the lights on the right, those are the edges of the runway. Well, prior to that, we had non-standard lights. If you landed in the middle of the lights, you were going to be half on the runway and half in the grass. So we had to standardize the runway lights. The safety area, the RSA and the obstacle-free area, we had to clear and grade that area, and we'll talk about that in a second here. And we had to install ducts for future PAPIs, which are precision approach path indicator lights and reels, runway and identifier lights. But a unique situation that we had to deal with was clearing the runway safety area and the obstacle-free area. These arrows point to obstructions. If you can think of a runway as a football field, right? And the football field and the stadium surrounded by seats. Well, an airport's the same way. You have the runway, which is a football field, but then you have different approaches. You have the primary approach, the transitional approach, the horizontal approach. all surrounding the airport. Well, we had penetrations in the transitional, we had penetrations in the primary, mainly trees, but we also had the elevation of the ground on the south side, which was considered an obstruction to the primary surface. So we had to remove all of this. And in doing so, our safety area off the south side of the runway on the west side of the airport did not meet standards. So we needed to have a 60-foot wide width off the edge of the runway. We had about 15 feet, and then it falls down about another 50 feet down into Tough Kenneman, Avondale, somewhere down in there. And we're going to widen this runway now. This is the old runway. So we're going to widen another 5 feet on that south side. So that safety area just got shorter and smaller. The reason for a safety area is so if an airplane were to land and run off the runway for whatever reason, it's got to have at least that amount of room to come to a complete stop before damaging anything or hitting anything. So to combat all this scope, we had to have a plan, and the engineer and the contractor and the airport and the township, everybody worked together, and we did this phenomenally because all the work was done outside of the actual landing area on the runway. It kept the businesses open, it kept the flight school open, it kept the fuel sales going, the maintenance shop going. All of the 27 acres of trees, the runway safety area, all the work along the edges were completed. And then we got to the hard surface. The hard surface of the runway was milled, and that was completed and resurfaced in 10 days total. So the airport was only shut down for 10 days during this whole process. These are some great photos of the construction. There's trucks laying down the sub base, and then the actual asphalt and the striping and the marking. So from closure to opening was only 10 days. And then we had to deal with the south side, or I'm sorry, the west side. Here you can see the runway width was widened, but unfortunately we were not able to call that runway because we didn't meet the standard safety area. You can see how it drops off pretty rapidly. So we had to shorten the runway for a period of time. So those arrows that you see up there is displaced threshold. So we shortened the runway about 400 feet. We then built one of the nicest walls in New Garden Township that nobody will ever see. Okay, that is our beautiful $1 million retaining wall. And that allowed us to grab the width that we needed on the south west side to have that 60-foot width. And then we were able to push the displaced threshold back to have now 3,700 feet of usable surface for landing at the airport. On to our aviation center. I have listed here, it says creating a lasting first impression, the aviation center construction. Well, we just talked about one. There's three most important things at an airport. First one, we all just learned, right? And what is that? That's the runway. Anybody have an idea what number 2 and number 3 are? Bathroom, coffee pot. Maintenance is a strong fourth. Transient people fly into the airport, get out of the airplane with their family, luggage. First thing they're looking for is the bathroom. Okay, flight instructors come in, pilots come in, examiners come in, they're looking for the coffee pot. All right. The way that we were organized at the airport, we had the airport office. It was above one of the older hangars. Okay, you had to walk up these old wood steps, and that's where the office was. You almost had 6 feet in there, right? You had to kind of duck. The bathroom was located across the ramp. So if you had to use the bathroom in a thunderstorm, you had to go puddle jumping and find the bathroom in one of the hangars. The flight school was in a trailer out front. So everything was everywhere. And what we decided to do was take a section of the one large hangar that was out there that was not utilized, where the bathrooms were already located, and then create an aviation center where we would bring the business end of the airport all together. The flight school, conference rooms, bathroom facility, the front door, where a customer, a tenant would come into the airport, and if they need to pay their hangar rent, or if they need to get work done on their aircraft, if they needed to use the bathroom, if they wanted a cup of coffee, everything would be right there. We did this internally and created what we have now as the Aviation Center. It's been a tremendous improvement for the airport. We've constructed it where we have the old with the new. When you walk in, the first thing you see is New Garden Flying Field and this large photo of what the airport looked like in 1972 with the tar and chip runway. So surrounded by exposed beams, which gives it that industrial hangar look. Again, some quick photos. That's one conference room. That's a large meeting room that we have. We utilize this for our Future Aviators program. There's ground schools for your private pilot and your instrument training held in there, some community events as well. The Pilot's Lounge. This is a photo of another hangar project that we did fairly recently. This was a new model, not only for the township, but for any airport in the region, where we took, we got that hangar owners group back together, and we created an opportunity for the hangar owners to invest private capital into building hangars at the airport. We constructed 6 60 by 60s that way. And here's a photo of the building. These are the top of the line hangars, epoxy coated floors, LED lighting. You walk in and you need sunglasses. They're so bright inside. But again, it brought a different clientele to New Garden Flying Field. It brought additional aircraft to New Garden Flying Field where we can sell more fuel. We can do more maintenance on the aircraft. And it created a sustainable, or helped create sustainable future for the airport. Other airport projects that we've been working on, RNAV approaches into the runway 6 and 24. What an RNAV approach is a GPS approach into the airport. It made the airport use increase during inclement weather. So if you're flying along in your aircraft in the clouds and you can't see outside, you now are able to be guided down, if you have the appropriate equipment on board your aircraft, down to the runway through GPS guidance and be able to land at the airport. We've brought new water into the airport. We've created a Future Aviators Pavilion and other future airport capital projects. Again, these are all grant capital projects, which are 95% federally funded, 5% state and 5% local. The reconstruct and widen runway phase 3, we're finishing up right now. It should be finished by the end of this month. That's a $680,000 project to relocate the electric power lines that come down off of Newark Road down into the field, underneath the ground, all the way up to a new electrical bunker that's by the Aviation Center. And it's also to upgrade the electric to the new standard, which is 34 kV service. We had a house that we had to have removed according to the FAA, off the end of the runway. And the other major focus I have is working with the state and the FAA on going after bipartisan infrastructure law funds, which are now available to airports to redo our bathrooms. So the only part of the Aviation Center right now that needs updated for ADA improvements and other improvements for that regard are our bathrooms, our pilot lounge. And we're looking at a grant funded project. Hopefully that'll happen soon. Normal airport operations consist of hangar rent, tie down rentals, aircraft temporary parking, avgas fuel sales, maintenance, restoration, and different events. Here's our fabulous airport team. The top, you can see myself, Tammy, and Scotty. Scotty's the assistant aviation maintenance director. Tammy's the lead admin at the airport. On the second row, Madison is another admin at the airport. She oversees the Future Aviators program, which we'll talk here about in a second. Our wonderful airport maintenance team, and then down at the bottom, the part-time line crew. The Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission handles the count for all airports within the region. The last count that they did was in 2021, and our operational counts, mainly around the COVID area, were down a little bit. Things are picking back up. We are due for another round of counting this coming summer. Focusing on our core values of camaraderie, community education, and the future of the 21st century aviator, we do run several events, or we try to. We try to continue, as we discussed, the tradition of the air show. We've held the Girls on the Run, working with the YMCA, Girls on the Run in the Stride 5K. I don't know if you're familiar with that program, but YMCA, working with local schools, have a leadership confidence building program with the youngsters in schools. And at the end of the year, they celebrate by participating in a 5K. We were very fortunate to be able to host this at the airport. We closed the runway down, and we had hundreds of kids run down the taxiway and the runway. It was a pretty neat event. They finished with a pancake breakfast up at the EAA chapter. Again, moving into aviation education, our sort of flagship, which started in 2009, is called the Future Aviators Program. The Future Aviators Program started with a discussion over a cup of coffee at Perkins with Court Dunn, the owner and operator of New Garden Flight Connection, the flight school. The concept behind this was to combat the age of the aging aviator, but really to expose kids to all aspects of aviation, something that we certainly were capable of. When everybody's young, they played with planes, trains, and automobiles, but somewhere along the line, they grew up and they got interested in computer games, computers, girls, boys, but we almost did it to ourselves too as an airport operator, because a lot of airports are getting perimeter fences put around them. And it's a sense of security, a sense of wildlife protection as well. But really what's happening is we're locking out the outside public to the facility. And that has hurt aviation, in my opinion, wholeheartedly. But we don't have a perimeter fence at New Garden Airport. We welcome families to come out routinely as much as you want on the weekends. During the weekdays, we have a wonderful pavilion up on top of the hill where you can come out and picnic. We have picnic tables down below. But the Future Aviators Program started with the concept of let's get the kids interested in aviation again. Let's make it available to them. And in 2009, and this is a rare photo of me with hair, we had 28 campers. And the goal was to be self-sufficient. Let's create a program, let's get their interest, but let's hope that it pays for itself, right? So in 2009, we had 28 campers and we were ecstatic, very excited. This next slide shows the growth of the program. In 2009, we had 28 campers. In last year, we had 236 registered campers as part of the program. This year, this is the first year that we've had to close registration. We offered a week in July and a week in August. We just reached 120 campers for July, and we're approaching that number in August. Last year, we did run 3 weeks. This year, we're back to 2. But it's been an incredible program. If you look at the advertising dollars spent last year, 0. Okay, it's all word of mouth. We raised $95,000 last year alone in private donations for this program. The registrations brought in about $84,000 as part of the program. So certainly an excellent program, a growing program. And Chris, if you could advance one, that would be great. Campers come from all over the United States. We have campers not just from this local area, but we get interest from South Carolina, North Carolina. This needs to be updated with Texas, California. This year, we have 2 campers coming from Hong Kong. We had one last year that came from Paris, and he'll actually be back again this summer. But it's a great program, and not only brings the youth out to the airport and families out to the airport, but it provides an opportunity for people to come in from outside of the area, stay at bed and breakfast, go to local hotels, go to Longwood Gardens, go up to the Hearst factory, go out to Hershey Park. It's worked well. And one more slide, please. We'll click through these. So this some photos of the campers. One thing that I look at, as far as bottom line numbers, okay, yeah, we all look at that. I get that. Okay. I look at the intrinsic value and really is the program working towards what our goal was. And if you look at the intrinsic value measured against the mission and the vision of the airport, we opened the doors to aviation and provided an aviation path for youngsters. We've given over 1,600 discovery flights as part of this program. A lot of these youngsters have come to camp and they've never had been in an aircraft. This is their first time in flying. So now they go up with an instructor, they get the controls, they come home with a logbook with their flight time in it. We provided a strong community relation tool, which positively cultivates and sustains relationships with the airport, which is a huge benefit. We've had families that live in the community that are not aware that there's really an airport, or maybe they're aware there's an airport, but they don't know what's going on there. Now they bring their child out to camp and then they spend family night out there on Thursday night. And now they have a greater understanding of what we do. And it feeds the airport economic engine, flight school, maintenance, hangars, fuel sales, et cetera. We can also look at the success based on the individual future aviator. A lot of these youngsters started out as 6 or 7 years old, have gone through the camp for several years. They've grown up, they've become counselors as part of the program. They've gone and they've gotten into college with a focus in aviation. We've had campers that are now flying F-16s protecting the president when he comes into town over New Garden. It's pretty ironic. But the next slide shows a good example. This is Nicky Prieto. He was our first poster child of the Future Aviators program. We put him on the brochure for the first couple years. He was young in this photo. Nicky's now 23. He's a airline pilot. He flies for Republic Air. Here's a picture of him when he got his glider pilot's license when he was 14, got his private pilot's license when he was 17. The next slide shows a bunch of orange shirts. And this is a great slide for me because this was several years ago, but all these orange shirts are our counselors. Every single one of them, except for these older guys down here, and they're old airport guys. We can spend hours talking about them, but we won't tonight. But every one of these orange shirts have now gone on to greater careers in aviation. Morgan Guerrero, she's awesome. She started out as just this little girl, shy little girl in our camp. It's grown up. She's now flying Black Hawk helicopters for the Army. She's the American badass. Excuse my French, but she's great. She was a babysitter for me for a little while with my kids, but certainly a great role model for these youngsters. The Future Aviators has snowballed into an After the Bell program that we offer within local schools. We just finished up one with the Kennett Middle School. It's a curriculum-based program for 6 weeks where we invite the schools out to the airport to go through the program 1 day a week for 6 weeks. It's a STEM-related science, technology, engineering, math program, hands-on activity builds. And we've also run some fundraising programs to generate scholarship funds, to be able to provide opportunities for people and families that may have some financial concerns on sending their youngsters to camp. So we really want to provide a space, a home for anybody in the program that want to come. We've run through some capital campaigns. If you want to go to the next slide, this is the construction of our Future Aviators Pavilion up on top of the hill. This is open throughout the year for anybody to come and sit and watch operations, but this is home base during summer camp. We grew the camps substantially. We needed to have a place that was safe and contained for the campers during camp time. So we bring in several tents, big tents as well as part of the program. This was 2 years ago. There's Steve Alabama up front with one of the Chester County commissioners that came out to visit the camp for the day. And I think she enjoyed her time and hopefully will be back. But the next slide just shows a flyer for this coming year, a week in July and a week in August. We'll skip that next slide and keep chugging along here in best interest of time. The flight school, I'll get into my recommendation to the board for the flight school. Looking at the flight school and the, yeah, right here is good. Talk about the flight school and the community benefits. I wanted to talk to you about the history of the airport, where we came from and where we are today, to show you how intertwined the flight school really is into the day-to-day operations and the success, and most importantly, the sustainability of New Garden Flying Field. If you look at the benefits of a flight school, it drives business to the airport. You guys can hopefully read that slide, but think of it as an economic engine where the flight school is the crankshaft and the airport is the case, the case that surrounds all the internal parts. The crankshaft turns the connecting rods push the pistons up and down the cylinders. It really creates that economic engine. They train new pilots. These new pilots buy avgas because they buy an airplane. They need a place to house their airplane. It's either in a hangar or it's in a tie down. The flight school maintenance, pilots break airplanes. So the flight school maintenance is handled by the airport maintenance shop. The operational count, which is a huge thing for the airport, as we discussed with our grant funding, with all the projects that have been done and all the projects that need to be done out there. Those operations count towards the level of funding that we can compete for as an airport. Our reliever airport status is very important, again, because that is allowing us to provide or to go after grant funding. And we need to be able to maintain at least 100 based aircraft at New Garden and a certain amount of operations, 25,000 operations annually. And a large part of those operations are flight school operations. And what an operation is a takeoff and a landing, okay? It acts as a huge community relation tool for the airport. It brings people out to the airport. They want to learn to fly. The Future Aviators program, sightseeing flights, discovery flights, families come and watch the airplanes to fly routinely on the weekends. But again, New Garden Flight Connection is 100% integrated in the day-to-day at New Garden Airport. Okay. Go back to the Redbird. We'll talk about that real quick. That's a couple slides before. The Redbird flight simulator was new last August. The concept of the Redbird flight simulator, and we went out and we raised funds within a fairly short amount of time, 2 to 3 weeks, for purchasing this flight simulator, which was about $100,000. And the purpose of this full motion flight sim is not only to be utilized during the Future Aviators programs in the summertime, as well as the After the Bell programs, but also to make this available through the flight school throughout the year, and to create a revenue stream, an ongoing revenue stream now and into the future, which will fund the Future Aviators program or increase funds to the Future Aviators program for development and also for scholarships. So there will be no family that's turned down if they want to send their kid to camp because of financial concerns. So our 2023 projections, as far as revenue goes for the flight sim, is about $40,000, $41,000, and we're tracking to be right on target for that. The current New Garden Flight Connection staff, we're fighting each other. I'm going to put this down. You can see up at the top, Court Dunn, Mary Kelly. Mary Kelly is a very part-time admin that helps with the flight school, myself. And then there's about 10 to 12 part-time or fuller time flight instructors. I say part-time or fuller time. They're all very part-time. They're all independent contractors. Most of them have jobs elsewhere. Most of them fly for somebody else. But that's the current makeup of the staff. Their current aircraft that they operate is a Cessna 172. They have 2 Cessna 150s, Cessna 140, and a Piper PA-28. These are very common flight training aircraft in good condition. Here you can take a look at the current profit and loss for the flight school from 2019 to 2022. I'll just run down this real quickly. 19, the profit was about $27,000, 2020, $12,000, 21, $39,000. and 22, 6.2 thousand. And again, this is profit. So after all the expenses, after the revenue and all the expenses, overhead, maintenance, insurance, everything comes out. That's what the profit was. If you look at the next slide where you have the total hours, there's 3 different hours to be considered when we look at flight school. You have Hobbs time, TAC time, and instruction time. Instruction time is just that. It's time with the flight instructor. Hobbs time is billable time. So that's what you as the pilot or you as the renter are getting charged. TAC time is what we track for maintenance. Okay, flight school aircraft are they're held to a standard where they have to have certain types of maintenance every so often. So you can see the hours that the aircraft accumulated over the years. And then on the column on the right shows what the total fuel sales and the total maintenance costs were 19 through 22. The expense breakdown for the flight school, 38% is maintenance, 29% is instruction expense, 18% is fuel, 9% is insurance, 5% is salary, and 1% is advertising. If you look at the monthly return on investment, based on the average from 2019 to 2022, total expenses, about $350,000, revenue, $367,000 in round numbers. That's about a 4.92% return on investment. And that is just the bottom line number. That doesn't include any of the intrinsic value of having a flight school. And remember, an airport without a flight school is an engine without a crankshaft. Okay, it's a dead airport. Okay, the flight school drives and brings in the business for the airport. Go ahead, next slide. The immediate expense reduction on day one of the transfer of the airport to the airport from New Garden Flight Connection will be a reduction in these numbers: salary, payroll service, personal Comcast, personal AT&T, personal Apple, Arlo, Pico, hangar, distribution, and fuel, which would be a savings of about $3,300 a month. These immediate savings would cover the acquisition costs for the flight school for us, for the airport. Ongoing, there will be other cost savings for the airport as an airport-owned flight school based on the average numbers from 19 to 22. Our maintenance cost reduction, we operate the maintenance shop, so our labor rate is obviously higher for a customer. If we were charging ourselves, it would be lower. Same thing with parts. We get parts at a discounted rate, and then when we install them on customer aircraft, there is a retail rate for that. Cost of fuel for the aircraft, we maintain the fueling for the fuel concession for the airport. So our cost of fuel is different than what it would be for the average customer. So the maintenance is a hard number to really forecast, but fuel is about another $521 per month of savings for an airport-owned flight school. The current flight school management is made up, dispatching aircraft and invoicing is currently handled by the airport office staff. We're currently dispatching the aircraft. We're currently checking them in already. Scheduling is currently handled remotely, a lot of it by Mary Kelly, offsite, the flight instructors, and the front desk. So it's a collective effort. Payroll is currently handled by Court Dunn and his payroll service. The flight school aircraft maintenance is already handled currently by the airport maintenance shop. The proposed flight school management moving forward would be not a whole lot of change. The dispatching would still be handled by the airport front office. The scheduling would be handled by the front desk, Mary Kelly as needed, remotely. Pilot history syllabus and credential folders would be managed, maintained by the front desk as well. Payroll will make a change, and we've actually already implemented, the flight school has already implemented a change here, that CFIs are independent contractors, so they are paid directly by the student. What we're proposing is that the airport would charge a fee to that flight instructor, a monthly fee for the usage of the office space, the computers, the phone, the scheduling service. so forth and so on. Flight school aircraft maintenance would remain the airport maintenance shop. Daily oversight of instructors, aircraft maintenance schedule, advertising, and public relations would be the airport director, myself. Current insurance is Acceleration Aviation Underwriters, Inc. The current New Garden Flight Connection limit of coverage is currently $1 million for each occurrence. The aircraft comprehensive coverage, aircraft agreed value, there's about a $5,000 deductible on the policy, and that's in motion. The current policy is $32,000 a year, and that number is built into the previous numbers and was included into the previous numbers. Horse Insurance, which is the airport's insurance company, they can provide adequate and the same coverage. They would just need an application and pilot questionnaire completed. This proposal was advertised and the bid was open. The ad was for the transfer of a Part 61 FAA Part 61 flight school to the airport with associated aircraft. We received a bid from New Garden Flight Connection, which was open on March 15th at 1 p.m. Next slide shows the actual bid, and the current value of the assets would be the following slide for a total of $270,000. That's all inclusive. The initial proposed payoff plan would be 10% upfront, which equates to $27,000. And then the remainder to be paid out monthly out of the revenue of the flight school in the amount of $2,700 for the next 90 months over time. The initial 10% can come out of, we have an existing line item in the airport budget. It's $440, $479, which is sequestered funds. We do have money in there. And to certainly cover that initial 10% plan. If you look at the replacement schedule for the existing aircraft, the replacement schedule mainly is engines, not necessarily airframes. So engines get taken out and overhauled. The engines in the current aircraft fleet are low to mid time. And those costs of overhaul have been built into the previous slide numbers for routine overhauling. So my purpose here tonight, and thank you for your time, this was rather lengthy, is to ask the board for approval on the bid to New Garden Flight Connection to transfer the flight school assets to the airport in the sum of $270,000 paid as described with 10% upfront, and the remaining over the next 90 months out of the revenue from the flight school.
Okay, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
So do we have a motion to transfer the New Garden Connection, New Garden Flight Connection to the?
It would actually just be the assets of
The
airport.
the motion is, I
Sorry.
believe, in the actual agenda with the I'm assuming on the staff recommendation report at the very end.
100 pages ago.
I'm sorry, you have it open there. It was at the very beginning of the packet,
Would be for the approval of the RFP.
page 97 of 290.
The Board of Supervisors authorized the township manager to award the flight school RFP bid to the New Garden Flight Connection in the amount of $270,000. That one?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And the bid is based off of the transfer of assets.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, do we have a motion to authorize? Do you want to read it, Steve?
So I'll make the motion to approve the RFP bid for transfer of the FAA Part 61 flight school with associated aircraft.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any public comment? Anyone? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just
Transfer the flight school assets from the Garden flight connection to the airport, not $270,000. I'm not sure I'm getting it.
We're looking to transfer the Part 61 FAA approved Part 61 flight school under the airport umbrella. So instead of New Garden Flight Connection, Court Dunn's retiring. And to continue the flight school, to grow the flight school, to promote the flight school nature at New Garden Flying Field for the airport, for the benefit of the airport, for the sustainability of the airport. We see that it's a valuable asset to have underneath the airport umbrella. So we put out an RFP asking for Part 61 flight school assets, aircraft, computers, filing cabinets, and New Garden Flight Connection answered that ad with a list of associated aircraft, office equipment, and the ability for us to take that and to continue the flight school underneath the airport umbrella for the amount of $270,000.
Okay, thanks for the.
So you're not only getting the assets of the actual plane itself, you're getting the actual like FAA already approved flight school.
The kit and caboodle.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So any more comments, Steve? Nope. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, passes unanimously. You have a flight school.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, moving along to Public Works fiscal year 23, purchase of fuel, line painting and stone. And I assume that's Kenny. Turn your brain back on.
Yeah. This is 5 million years ago. So this is the annual materials contract we do for this go up.
I don't have it. I'm sorry. I don't have the paper with me. It is the annual co-op materials contract that we do. So from memory, Dixieland got the bid at 37 cents over the daily rack price for the fuel.
Cost plus.
What's that?
Cost plus.
Cost plus, yes. Yeah, so that daily number changes, but the 37 cents stays true for the entire contract.
Okay, so do we have a motion to purchase in the estimated amounts of fuel, $38,238, which is Dixieland he just noted, line painting of $37,530, and stone in the amount of $18,013.50?
I'll make a motion.
I'll
Second.
Okay. I guess the public is gone except for two individuals. Three individuals.
Kenny, was
I'm not counting people I directly employ.
was the rebid accepted while we've been sitting here for the last 2 hours?
You know what? I think the bridge is probably needs to be redesigned at this point. Yes.
The bridge might be in.
Okay, so all in favor, aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. You can turn your brain back off, Kenny.
Thank you.
Okay, and moving on to the phase 2 demolition. We have a consideration of approval to demolish New Garden Hills Day Camp, open air gym and shooting range that Mike Buck gave a presentation to. Time for Mike's brain to turn back on.
Good evening. Good evening. Good night, everyone. Yes, so just a follow-up.
Imagine if we didn't have pizza.
I know, pizza. Okay, cool.
There we go.
So as a follow-up to the February Phase 2 update presentation of New Garden Hills, I wanted to bring up round 2, a proposed round 2 demolition tonight so that we could move forward with kind of that Phase 2.5 we had talked about. Reason being, again, as the 2020 needs assessment doesn't support the renovation or the use of these buildings. When you look at the cost of renovation versus the cost of demolition, the cost of demolition is favorable. And we need additional parking for the pickleball. Additional parking would be advantageous. The demolition of the day camp as well as the open air gym could add as many as 30 parking spots, which would be great, especially if our pickleball courts are as popular. Yeah, so there would be the option to put maybe 2 courts here in this open air gym. However, as I'm currently in the process of working out big picture rephased approach and revisioning for the entire park, which I hope to give that presentation in June. As part of that presentation, there's going to be an opportunity to add an area that focuses solely on active recreation, where we could add some additional courts. Putting too many courts in this area may take away parking from folks that are just trying to enjoy the playground and the rent pavilions. I haven't talked about the shooting range before because I always thought it was just a petting zoo or something, something weird like that. But as we were clearing it out, I don't know. There's
Combination shooting range petting zoo.
There's
You found some
there's
lead?
gates and makeshift prisons everywhere here. So over here, like these things are actually the target. So anyway, this is like just low hanging fruit. This would be really easy to rip out. So that would be like in the 2 to 5K range. The other buildings you've seen before, 35 to 50, and the other one was, I think, 25 to 40 or something like that. But
And just to add on, these are the 2 primary structures that weren't included in the actual YSM like glide path for cost estimates. So we have no speculative cost or actual viable programmatic reasoning to rehabilitate these 2 structures. And currently within the phase 2 concept, along that phase 2 corridor, there's insufficient parking if we're going to have quote unquote a viable community park area with now kind of, I guess, a devote pickleball following as well. So we can't necessarily overpark this initial rollout for phase 2 enough based off of viable use. And these structures would be natural places to kind of house some additional parking lot. How?
60s.
I believe this building was built in the 80s.
Yeah, that's another part too. And based off of your prior understanding and discussions with the actual Diocese of Wilmington officials that ran the park, a lot of these structures were built pretty haphazardly over the last like the 70s and mostly in the 80s timeframe. So from a historical perspective, there's very limited historical purposing, and the materials were
Repurposed.
essentially trash.
They were repurposed from other buildings and things.
Yeah,
They
and
were
then-
very frugal.
Right.
Mhm.
So,
and nothing built to code. So
Yes.
we can't use them.
And the historical commission does approve of the demo. They support the demolition of these structures, provided we save the geese weather vanes on top of this building, which I'll
Perfect.
gladly do. Yeah, so the proposed, and I got an estimate. The proposed estimate for these structures would be 70 to 90K. So the funding for that would come from the difference right now that exists between the approved overall budget of just over 1.4 million for this phase and the current estimated cost of the project, which brings us to 1.3. So we've got $100,000
So when we recommend,
available. Yeah.
when we recommended all the phase 2 options, we built ourselves a buffer for the total amount of scope work that we had already committed funding for phase 2. So within that savings, part of it is continuing to demolish existing structures within the phase 2 area that weren't funded. And then I think some of the remaining funds we're looking at for the actual, what Mike is working towards with Pannoni Engineering, and we don't have yet to date, which essentially is a true up engineering specific cost estimate for the entire phase development of the entire New Garden Hills property. So we still have no idea as of 2023 what the total scope cost should look like from an engineering and design estimate standpoint. It was always based off of what was speculatively drawn as a cartoon off the YSM study. We need to update that with our township engineer. And so that's roughly about $10,000 as well, which is part of this and within our CIP. So that was my recommendation to Mike, was to get a scope estimate for this and then also start pursuing that actual phase engineering estimate for all of New Garden Hills.
Like, does
Yep.
steel have any value?
The bid is written so that the value of the steel goes towards the cost of the demolition or offsets the cost of the demolition. Yeah, so the ask is approval to demolish these building structures and to prepare a request for bid for the work.
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'm in favor.
Cool.
Okay, do we have any public comments? Anyone interested? No?
Exactly.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Knock down some stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have the PA opioid settlement funding application.
Correct. So this was a very last minute addition to the agenda. So I got wind of this from PSAT saying that our township had yet to essentially raise their hand as a potential viable township interested in possible wave 2 opioid settlement funding currently being processed through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with 5 different, I guess, large companies, you know, your Walmart, Walgreens, Johnson & Johnson, any kind of larger scale pharmaceutical distribution kind of companies. And so what this does is essentially says that we're a township, we're interested in the funding, doesn't earmark anything, doesn't require us to commit to anything. It's basically just saying we're interested. So all of this settlement funding then gets paid out to all of the counties. The counties then seek actual project or program initiative submissions from either townships, nonprofits, anybody who has a vested interest with some sort of like opioid support related program or project. The funding is based off of the payout distributions over a short amount of time. I'd imagine a few years, but it's like a finite source of funding. So we wouldn't be trying to build some sort of like township program that's built for like operational continuance. And so my very quick understanding with 2 representatives from the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office was that this was, you know, why not just at least raise our hand, get some semblance of understanding if we do have projects. After talking with our fire company, I do believe that we have calls for service issues that was raised. And a lot of that is driven by Bowling Green as just a driver of EMS calls. A lot of those patients are opioid related. And so this would be a way to seek some sort of a possible revenue recovery. Granted, I have no speculative understanding that that is even a viable project because the eligibility criteria is actually going to be coming out here in the next few weeks. But we would also work with our fire and police departments and be able to start understanding what possible use of this funding could be put into place. So that's the mission. This is just a recommended approval for me to sign and submit these applications on behalf of the township, being the signing official, which this would have to be submitted by tomorrow because it's due by tomorrow. And I learned about it on Friday afternoon.
So we're just basically opting in so that you can.
We're opting in to be eligible for the possibility of maybe having a project. So it is the least sticky sport, but at least it gets us in the door where we're not held out bureaucratically.
Right.
Yep.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Any public comment, anything? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. You got 2 hours.
I promise to be fast to this. And the last part is the budget amendment. So I'd like to save the best for last. Hopefully everyone is still awake. This was not intentional to put the budget last, but
very smart.
So you'll see in your, not only your actual agenda packets, the full included budget brief with the top sheet, but also provided to the website, there is an actual attached Excel working sheet that shows not only all of the FY23 proposed versus amended highlighted areas with commentary, but also if you choose to expand retroactively, it shows 2019 actuals based off of, the 2019, 2021, and 22, kind of the roll up for why we have our budget the way that it is. So just a little bit from a public perspective to kind of provide a little bit of information about our years of operational budgets over the time. So.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjust the budget from?
I was going to actually walk through some of these things just to kind of brief some of the high level changes here. But so one of the biggest things that just in terms of adjusting the actual reporting of how we reported revenue, the biggest thing here that we're actually changing is the adjustment of ARPA funding out of our general fund and put it within our actual capital fund. I believe that was just during the proposal process, but it muddied the actual general fund in terms of over-reporting non-realized general fund revenue. So we had to be able to reduce that. And so that's kind of where the net real savings is. So it's not like we're reducing the budget by a dramatic almost $700,000 in revenue. It's just reallocating that to capital. So that was one of the biggest adjustments that we had to make. Another one was there was a reported state grant revenue of $25K in revenues that was actually a sought after reimbursement schedule that we've been working pretty diligently with finance to support I believe it's the Main Street TASA project, which is that streetscape project that we approved as of the beginning of last year. And this just right sizes the actual expected amount of revenues based off of non-sought after reimbursements over the last few years. So the real number was suggested to be 217. We'll have to kind of pare that back a little bit. It's probably going to be somewhere in the higher 180s or 170s. But that was just one other revenue reporting there. But net, you can just show that all in all, with some of the adjustments as well as the actual reducing in revenues, our net position here in terms of what our amended budget in terms of revenues and expenditures should be is about $7,066,000 versus the originally expected of $7.8 million. So good news overall, but within that, the larger numbers are polluting that number for the most part. Within the amended budget, it was about finding some of the line item differences to basically compensate for some staffing changes, some other kinds of reparking of some sub funds within the general fund. But overall, in addition to factoring in revenue, it was a line item total difference of about $89,000, but with revenue applied to it, it actually comes out to being $75,000. So that is what the actual realized savings is in terms of expenditures for the amended budget. And you can see the breakdown here. I kind of tried to park it mostly on a line item basis of what actually changed, so people can see where we actually saw revenue positive impacts, expenditure positive impacts. That means expenditure reductions. So for the most part, the biggest ones here was at our police department. They had spec'd out to hire about 4 different sworn officers. That didn't happen in the first quarter. So we adjusted that in order to be able to compensate for some staffing changes. This will go back to normal realized cost from an operating standpoint in FY24, but it did give us some substantive flexibility as well, as we didn't have to actually seek the contingency plan, I believe it was, which was about $44,000 for the kind of spring semester for the SRO. That was unrealized cost as well. Another one was essentially just a misallocated library component for contributions that should have been reported in capital. It was reported in capital. So we had an instance where we had 2 reportings, both in our general fund and capital fund. So that in and of itself sponged up a lot of the room for us being able to make what I call the negative financial impacts, which was all of the differences in our essentially personnel that we've had in terms of recent turnover and changes and some of the cost differences between those personnel. So that's the good news is even if you saw the increases here, the differences of our revenue decreases, our expenditure decreases we're in the positive about $89,000. So it was a good win for us. The biggest drivers of this was we did have obviously Lou retiring, but we didn't have that built into our budget in terms of not just the cost for retirement and payout for leave accruals and everything else, but also the actual turnover time when they're having 2 finance directors at the same time. Another one was for our ERP. We actually hosted it's actually the hosting cost, which is an operational cost, not a capital cost. We're reporting it in capital. We should be reporting in general fund in terms of the total cost for our ERP. So that brought $23K into our general fund budget, which that's where it's supposed to be. And another big one there right now is just we're continually absorbing the cost for a contract official, for our zoning official right now. This is also in lieu of not paying a full-time salaried employee. That recruitment process is hopefully at the very end here. I hope to hear back tomorrow, but that's just one where at least it's a realized cost that is less than the cost for a full-time official. Granted, the net detriment is just the actual service delivery that we're able to provide residents right now is not optimal because we're with somebody who is very temporary on a weekly basis. So those are just highlights from the larger one. The larger negative impacts. Quickly walking through capital fund. The biggest story here is that we're not increasing expenditures without also dramatically increasing reported revenues. A lot of that was around some of the non-reported grant funding that we had for some of these transportation projects that are now kind of being shown on our line item general fund, our capital budget. But in all, like our net margin between the net revenue increase and net expenditure increase, and granted, these expenditures are mostly subsidized by realized grants that we're increasing the budget by. So not this is additional taxpayer increases. So just make sure that everybody realizes that. So in terms of capital revenue, you can see a lot of this has to deal with phase two. So phase two grant funding was split up amongst a couple different buckets where there was a township match. That's within the DCD grants there that you can see reported, the 125 and 250. The township has a match of 125 as well. And this is for phase two project that was actually, I believe, proposed to be implemented in FY24. But we're already doing that project, and that's what Mike's been talking about from the last few meetings. This is a project that's currently ongoing, but we didn't have that as an active realized FY23 project within our capital. So overall, in terms of our capital increases and of our overall increase for phase two, that's like kind of like ARPA that shot our expenditures kind of significantly higher. But these are projects that we're just essentially saying we were already doing them. They were misreported as deferred to 24 and needed to be in FY23 in order to execute the actual agreements and execute the project. Another one here is just for the actually, no, I already talked about the Baltimore Pike. That's the MSF grant scheme. I think I said TASA, but that's for the MSF grant for the Baltimore Pike study. So here you can see some of the net reductions. Some of these other projects were just ones that we didn't necessarily have still active as required for FY23. In this case, the 80K was actually completed at the very end of 22. And as you see, the New Garden Hills one just needed to be able to be pulled over for. Excuse me, no, I'm sorry. I'm sinking at a slant here. We actually had two projects within our capital fund that were earmarked for New Garden Hills culvert replacement. That's only one project. So that was just another net reduction. Just by cleaning the actual budget up, we were able to just reduce our actual reduction in expenditures. And that's also one that's fully grant funded. So it's a $237 net $1,000 project that has aligned expenditure with revenue. One thing that I did want to highlight here is that just a complete reduction of the capital shouldn't necessarily be the recommendation. Some of it should be replacement of certain types of projects that are also a viability and need for the township. And so one of them was just the itemized breakdown for the $23,000 that was earmarked previously for the ERP. I think we should still recommend to use that for like administrative use. In this case would be the replacement of our current website, as well as another application for our Parks and Recreation Department to be able to better structure kind of registrations and payments for reserving pavilions and park spaces. And then the other part to migrate our server. So right now, in terms of the website, we have a website that's no longer maintained. So I have no idea, can speak to any degree of confidence, and this is with the vendor, that the coding that's supporting the current website could crash at any moment and we wouldn't have a website anymore. So that's a risk. I feel like that's something that if we can support the replacement, and this would be a multi-year at a solid flat number over the course of the next 3 years to absorb the implementation cost. Once we're complete with that over FY23 to 25 to fund that replacement from an implementation standpoint, and it's going to be a net flat payment of about, I'm looking at my numbers here, $10,000 per year, and then over the next 2 years, an additional roughly about $12,000, and that's just implementation plus the cost for service. we would be complete with replacing our website, but our actual general fund operating costs will only go from 4,000 to like just over 5,000. So it's a very nominal increase in terms of ongoing cost to the township, but a complete dramatic replacement overhaul. We can do some better functionality. And oh, by the way, not have to risk losing our website, which is our primary engagement platform with residents. As for the server one, the biggest potential risk with that one was the fact that we had a server that was proposed that we did not include, that actually is in the process of failing. That was as of the latest update from Dave Drumheller from Rich Technologies. So this would actually replace that, and we would actually be fully cloud hosted as a township. This is essentially everything on our share file folder. So right now, everything on our share file folder is essentially at risk of being lost by an in-house hosted web server. So whatever we have in there, yes, for the most part. Yeah. So correct. That is a safe assumption. So those would just be one things when we approve this amended budget. It would actually also be approving these as capital items included in that proposed budget. And then in the course of the next few months, we would be coming forward with these projects for approval. So I just wanted to highlight these in case you're wondering where these are coming from. It's from this cost savings from the 23K, but we're absorbing that back into useful capital projects for administrative purposes. The net negative impact, as you can see, it's just continuing some of the actual, I would say, those ROI-based decisions that we made to fund certain levels of analysis required to get larger level capital items approved. If you can go into the funding slides that show kind of the breakdown, I like to show things by ROI of what we've committed to and what we're going to get in return. A lot of times when you see all of the stratified revenues across the board, you don't really know what it's going towards. This is a better way to kind of think about it. And so for the most part, we have funded in our capital plan the engineering preliminary design assessments required to then take that assessment, workshop it through or shop it around for grants and then seek grants. And we've been really successful at that. So this is just letting people know that there's a couple different more breadcrumbs to cover the totality of the cost required to get the engineering design complete. But this is the net return, and this is the grant we already have in place to fund the tangible element, which is the construction cost. So these are shovel-ready projects that we currently have. So residents know the Baltimore Pike Newark Road project is about a 96% return on investment for the township. That's an excellent deal, considering it's a potentially $15 million project. The Tough Kenneman Main Street Streetscape project, this was one that wasn't included in the FY23 budget, but it's one that we had committed to for funds to invest in the actual preliminary engineering and design. That was up to a cost of $239.5K. But at the end, it's going to be almost $1 million project to improve multimodal pedestrian access along Main Street in Tough Kenneman, which is a part of that grander Tough Kenneman transportation plan, which is essentially the throughput of the corridors around Tough Kenneman, which is a township priority. So a 76% return on investment. Some of the other ones, so the phase 2, you can see that. I mean, that one's already in progress. The New Garden Hills one for the culvert, that's 100%. And then some street paving projects, because people don't necessarily know how we get different funding for street paving. Right now, we're primarily using the interest income from the sewer sale money. So that $22 million roughly left balance is going to work in terms of interest income that we're returning back. And we're essentially saying that we're going to be throwing that at street improvements to get a considerable amount of overhauling for certain segments of our roads that are in dire need of paving, as well as our liquid fuels. So an 89% use of essentially non-township funds from like a cash funds for those projects. And then we do have some, I would call them singular in time stormwater projects. These are ones that we did commit funding for, and they're for kind of restoration projects with BRC, which is the Brandywine Red Clay Alliance. They essentially provide they're like our stormwater, I guess in this case, construction project managers. And so they're managing the township match with their own grant sought after matches to do restoration projects, in which case these projects are in line with our TMDL program that was identified by Aero back in like the 2021 phase. Just kind of continuing on some of the bigger ticket items. I wanted to kind of give people an understanding of not only things that we currently have coming that are funded, but also some of the unfunded ones. So it's not necessarily When you think of, for my preference in a 23 capital plan, it wouldn't just been FY 23, it would have been FY 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28. You had a multiple year view. We didn't report that on our budget because that was certain, but that would be the way going forward. So 24 will have that multi-year view reported on the actual budget. But within that, we have some significantly larger capital items coming that we will need to kind of go through the same process. You know, we're going to seek an ability to fund the engineering and analysis, to seek grants, because that's kind of our large scale capital strategy that's been working. And hopefully that'll be the way to continue forward. But Tough Kenneman stormwater assessment was provided back. It's going to be brought forward in terms of next month of the actual report, but we're talking roughly north of a $4 million stormwater improvement project just in Tough Kenneman alone for that infrastructure. As well as we haven't yet implemented the Arrow strategy to meet our TMDL reductions, which the compliance to create the report was part of it. The compliance to actually commit and expend funds to do those projects was not part of that compliance. My thinking is just, it's better to be proactive rather than reactive. It's only a matter of time before PADEP comes down with this as an unfunded mandated program that you have to be in compliance with. So it does behoove the township's best interest long-term to start executing some of these TMDL reductions and not treating stormwater as reactive to that culvert's failing, that street's failing. We need to fix that stuff. It's more of a what's achieving the larger level strategy for the township, which is in compliance with Pennsylvania standards. And the total cost of that, I think it was about 17 bioswale projects located without the township, was at a net cost of about, this is obviously a 3-year-old study, so it probably would have increased by then, but at the time was just over $700,000. And this, of course, would be a 5-year compliance program that I think in 2 years we have to update again. I'll see if it's still viable, but Pannoni's providing that assessment. And then just some other ones that we don't necessarily have. You know, Mike working with Pannoni right now, we don't have a true speculative out-phased concept plan for New Garden Hills, as well as anything for facilities, transportation, and of course the newly acquired Smedley Preserve. But these are just kind of, because we don't have numbers attached to them, kind of quote unquote unfunded capital liabilities for the township. But that's the big thing in terms of general fund and capital fund. I won't go into some of the sub funds because those are kind of more nuanced and minor in approach, and they're not necessarily, I would say, as impactful as the primary two funds. It's important to note just from a airport, and John went into ad nauseum about it, but airport is fully revenue supported model. So there is no taxpayer number that goes into that airport fund. So I just wanted to provide that. And he lists all of his projects and what changed. Within the open space fund, it's operating similarly to the airport. It has its own cash balance. It's earmarked actual revenue from an EIT perspective that provides the sustainable cash influx and revenue that we essentially allocate out. The biggest thing was just we didn't necessarily fully report the net expended reimbursements that are coming back to the township in FY 23 for the acquisition, mostly for the Lochnaron Golf Course. That's coming back in 23. So we just needed to right size that budget. So it looks like a significant increase. It's not, it's just we're reporting the revenues we're expecting to get. And a lot of that will offset the expenditures that were not reported that went into the acquisition costs for Lochnaron and a couple other smaller properties as well. But this was something that we just needed to report it. But at the end of the day, we're still in a net positive position. And this is using funds that is kind of self-contained. And I think there wasn't much out with the remaining funds. So are there any questions?
A lot of work went into this.
Yeah.
I want to, this was the first, I think, exercise that I sat down with staff over the course of the last 3 weeks, and a long time sit down with me asking lots of painful questions, but applaud our finance team for doing this. It was a very, I would call it useful exercise. And it's something that going forward, we're going to be monitoring budget to actual updates on a quarterly basis between finance, myself and staff, and when I see staff, the department directors, just to make sure we have that continual. But this was a moment in time, right sizing. Hopefully we don't have any kind of massive events. We have to amend the budget again. But that's, we'll leave that for a future time. But I like I say, this couldn't have been done without the whole team. So
Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I would like to point out that I used to call Christy and Steve at like 11 o'clock every night, and I have not had to do that since you got here. So that is super great. Nothing is on fire anymore.
I'm knocking wood for that one too.
So we need an actual motion to amend the budget.
Correct. Everything that went in from a Pennsylvania statute didn't necessarily delineate amending your budget on a routine basis in the middle of the fiscal year. It was mostly for during the proposal process and then following an election. So it's, I guess, in keeping with Pennsylvania legislation, very loose. So this was just my best interpretation to provide this information, but knowing that from the total, I think it's in the staff recommendation report, we're not increasing net revenues or expenditures by larger than 10%. So we're still within that. And the biggest difference, like I said, is the reallocation of the phase 2 project to 23 and the use of ARPA funding in capital fund versus general fund. And that's really all is substantively changing for the bigger numbers. In terms of the granular numbers, we're actually saving about, in this case, $90,000 in general fund operating revenue, or excuse me, expenditures that builds us a margin, at least for this year, for the remaining part of the year.
Chris, you could tell there's a boatload of work that went into all of this. And your team, everything was put together. As we move forward, I'm hoping we'll have more time to dig down into some of the details of everything that you guys have put together.
Oh, in terms of what specifically?
Yeah, I mean, just like you ran through
Yes.
now and about
If you open the Excel document within the actual, it's uploaded to the website as well, so it's available for all public to see. So
server crash.
what's that? Until the server crash. Well, this is, yeah, hopefully it's a hosted service, so it's not until the server crashes, until the website crashes. But nevertheless, so that one shows on a line item basis every highlighted area where there was a proposed change, and that's not necessarily what increase or decrease, but it's also ones that we kind of shifted around the money to better report it. So in this case, for contributions, we had it kind of like stratified out in multiple different areas that it's tough to understand kind of what that means. We rolled it up to the Board of Supervisors line item budget, so you can see all the contributions there. So from a public reporting standpoint, people understand what we had itemized for our approved contributions. So different changes like that as well. So I felt like that helps provide that granularity of detail. So if that's what you're looking for, it's within that Excel document. I would just unhide everything. I tried to consolidate it for the view, but it's tabular based off of every single fund that we have an active fund with a budget against.
When do the budget meetings start?
Not soon enough.
For real though, when do they start?
So we normally do, yeah, it's kind of a mid-year point. So July, August timeframe for capital planning purposes. Internally, I'll get submitted proposals from department directors earlier than that, so we can compile and create the first proposed capital budget. And then we'll come back kind of an interval after that, maybe about a month and a half afterwards, and have that first initial proposed operating budget for everything. But with that, there's going to be some changes in terms of how we structure the FY24 budget to reduce, I guess, some inoperable or like should be more inactive general or line items, and then maybe have less kind of divisional kind of components to it. So to kind of streamline it, I guess, a little bit and consolidate.
Right.
But
And have we made the contribution this year to the library?
to my understanding, for the library contribution for the 100K,
Yeah.
for this would be year 3 of it, correct, Lou? Yeah. And have we made that 100K contribution yet? Or is that scheduled for? Okay, so it's a mid-year appropriation.
Could we push that up there to next month? We met with them to tour the library last weekend or so. And they asked, since, things are wrapping up in terms of constructing the library, they're in a bit of a cash flow crunch, and just asked if we could push that up a couple months. Is that an issue since we've already allocated the money? And it's a pretty big check to write, I know, but yeah.
I mean, it's already budgeted, and I think they're ahead of schedule on the building. So in terms, they're drawing the construction loan down, and with prime going up, they're paying a lot more interest on their money right now. And I think that's the major issue. I don't think they're short any money in any way, but they're looking for all of the municipalities to pay, if they can. I think that was the request.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah, we will look at, I mean, I can't speak off the top of my head, but if it's something where it's a
I mean, if you go ahead
23
and do it, it's
mid-year
already earmarked.
appropriation, if there is anything for 1 month to the right of that, we can look at it. I just don't know what underlying cash balance we have that money against. And so
Right.
we don't want to draw down something unexpectedly and not have the cash balance underneath it and overdraft on an account. So,
Yep.
so we'll make that adjustment and get that provided.
Thank
Yep.
you. All right,
Okay.
so do I have a motion
Yeah.
to amend the budget?
So I want to make the motion to amend the budget for the calendar year 2023
Okay.
in accordance with what's been advertised on the website as well as what the manager and the staff presented this evening.
Do I have a second? Okay. All right, anyone for the public left? Nope. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're done with the agenda. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Or sorry, do I have any public parting comments? No, I think we're all ready to
Mass
go
is
home.
over.
Nope. So I have a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Good night.
Mass is over going.
Slam it, David. Break it.
Do it, David.